Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a meeting of the Tulare County Board of Supervisors. We will begin today's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. We will be led today by Supervisor Valero.
Please join me in saluting our nation's flag. Ready, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right, item number 1 on our agenda today is Board of Supervisors matters, and we will begin with Supervisor Shucklian.
All right, give me a second here. Okay, actually it was not too busy of a week. Again, just fielding a lot of calls regarding COVID and the small business grants, which we will get an update on today. But I was able to be in attendance Thursday afternoon when the state's unified support team was here. They spent 2 days here with our HHSA staff and various community partners. And I have to say, I think they were pretty impressed. That's the feeling that I got during that last session that they were here. I'm glad that they were able to hear our story and see the collaboration that we have and the partnerships that we have and understand Tulare County a little bit more than just by numbers that are presented to them. So I'm sure you may want to add something to that when you speak. So I just want to I think it's a good thing. Like I told them at first, we thought, maybe some people thought, oh, we're the bad kids, the state's coming in, but, anytime that we can get any assistance from the state to improve our numbers and to make it safer for, our citizens, I welcome it. So I think it was a good thing. So that's all I have.
All right, great. Supervisor Valero.
Great. Good morning, Tulare County. So I just want to share that I had the opportunity to give a brief video on the picking up and dropping off procedures for our county libraries. This informational video gives students and families the opportunity to continue learning and growing during the COVID-19 pandemic. We need to help prevent learning loss by connecting with our local libraries and utilizing the resources readily available to assist them. Thank you to our county library system for playing a huge role in this endeavor, and so read on, Tulare County. I also had the opportunity to participate in a food distribution and mask giveaway in the community of London. Thank you to the Sheriff's Office for putting this together, and I know there's another one coming up in Monson, Sultana, and hope to be there as well. These food distribution events throughout the county provides a testament to the hard work of county services in places where the need is great. When I see families drive up to receive fresh food boxes and masks, it shows me that children are hurting, families are hurting, and communities are hurting tremendously. And surprisingly, this affects every income bracket, from the well-off to the low income, who are trying to stay above in order to provide for their families. Now more than ever, we need to come together, press forward, and support each other through this difficult experience. I also want to thank the Tulare County Small Business Grant opportunity led by our Workforce Investment Board. I was able to put on a workshop for District 4, and I want to thank Nicola and Blanca for your participation and wealth of information. This past Saturday, I helped pass out backpacks and school supplies to students in Cutler, Orosi. Thank you to Family Healthcare Network for the invitation, and a great thank you to the Lions Club of Cutler-Orosi for helping sponsor the event also. We were able to hand out 500 backpacks in 90 minutes, even though the event was scheduled from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then I also want to give a big shout out to United Way Tulare County for donating masks to our agricultural workers. And then this week, I have a Government Affairs Committee meeting tomorrow with the Dinuba Chamber, along with Kings River East GSA meeting on Thursday. And that is all I have, Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Crocker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last week, I attended the Exeter Cemetery's monthly district. They had invited me just to kind of see what's going on out there and some of the challenges that they're having. I know that they have a great interest in looking for a water solution for Deep Creek Cemetery, which is just north of Farmersville. But I think one of the notes that I took from that meeting is that that district and so many other special districts are really struggling, and they have been struggling even pre-COVID, and that continues. New challenges continue to make that tougher and tougher, and so I think that that's going to be more of a concern and issue for this board that we're going to be hearing from over the next several months and years ahead. Last week, I also participated in a Senate and Assembly, two separate meetings, hearings on behalf of the Tule River's new compact that was both getting informational hearings. Both the Assembly and the Senate have to vote on ratifying the governor's signing of that compact. But overall, there were 5 other tribes that have new compacts as well, and so they're taking them all together. So it's very favorable for Tule River and getting a new compact signed that will include additional gaming options than what they have currently. That's another important step in moving forward with the casino relocation. Yesterday, we had our first ever Tulare County Regional Transit Authority meeting, and I'm proud to say that my colleagues selected me as chair of that new organization. We will be holding a special meeting this upcoming Monday to specifically look at staffing for that organization. Preliminary, we're looking to contract services with the city of Porterville and their transit agency to provide some part-time assistance from an administrative standpoint. And that we should be moving forward rather quickly as far as getting some movement there. This upcoming week, we have an Air District meeting on Thursday. There's also a NACO Western Regional call, and the San Joaquin Valley Blueprint on water will be all having meetings on Thursday. The only other thing that I'd like to mention is that I've been speaking with our utilities in regards to the blackouts, and based on the information that I've seen and my past experience is that we're looking at a lack of infrastructure. We don't have the ability to move power around from where power is readily available to where it's needed, primarily in the mode of transmission lines, and that's due to state policies, and we've also losing a lot of baseload power. Diablo Canyon is scheduled to be shut down in 2025. San Onofre has already shut down, and there's a lot of other gas-fired plants and even hydro facilities that have shut down over the last several years. And all that leads to less power, less ability to have it at night when we need it when solar is offline. That's all I have.
Supervisor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. As Supervisor Shuckling mentioned, I also took a lot of calls this last week about the small business grants and just describing the qualifications for that and alleviating some fears about government money, quote unquote, coming in. So hopefully that resulted in a few more applications being sent in. Tuesday, after last week's board meeting, I did meet with Salt and Light Works to discuss some options and ideas for homeless housing in the area. and in the county, specifically at tiny home communities. They're very, that organization seems to be very serious about moving forward with it, and so some options coming up that we'll be probably dealing with as a board before long. And then on Wednesday, as Supervisor Crocker mentioned, we were both on a call with the Feed to Trust Ad Hoc Committee for the Tule River Tribe, and specifically talking about the federal status of the Feed to Trust application after sort of going through the state and going through the county, circling back to the federal government, and they're having just a little bit of a delay there. So those were the calls that Supervisor Crocker followed up with to try to provide some help in that area. And then on Thursday, had a call with the San Joaquin Valley Regional Policy Council and prepping for what would normally be the DC Valley Voice trip. Now it'll be a DC Valley Voice call, and that'll happen on September 10th, talking about the 8 valleys, or the 8 counties in the valley, just talking about the needs, air quality, water, water storage, infrastructure, transportation, obviously, rail. So lots of things to discuss, and we sort of honed in on some things on that call. What will be on our lobbying platform. We'll have another call coming up here shortly, and to get one more prep before we do that call on the 10th. And so there's really a pretty good platform that's been put together by that group, and we took a report on that yesterday at our TCAG meeting that we were all a part of. We had some reports on that, as well as things that we've been doing, partnering with Caltrans, some creative ways to move around, adapting to some new state and new federal standards that have come out, but getting creative, getting projects done, even in some difficult times. And that is all I have to report, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Supervisor. So I had the opportunity to participate in person at the Unified Support Team meeting last Thursday along with Supervisor Shucklian. I could tell that it was a very effective meeting, and it demonstrated our local ability to collaborate with outside of just the world of government, and collaborate with local partners and organizations to be sure that we're doing all that we can amongst the various population groups. I believe that the take-home message that was sent in summary yesterday was the goal of this last week was the goal of the support team was to come up with one action plan for the entire valley. There are very specific and unique action steps and resources that are going to be available here in Tulare County, even within the San Joaquin Valley. It will also include accountability steps, long-term guidance, continued conversation, and coordination with the state. I kind of took that away as the message, and do appreciate all of the resources that the state brought to Tulare County to hear from our own local perspective. And I do have to say I appreciate HHSA and all the work that they did. This meeting was a bit unique, I think, because in the state of California, as they've done these meetings throughout the valley, typically the Unified Support Team establishes the agenda. But in the case of the Tulare County meeting, it was HHSA that established the agenda to make sure that we could tailor the meeting and tailor the effort towards Tulare County's specific needs. And I thought that was very effective, and also gave us an opportunity to showcase what we were doing very well, and also to learn some things that we need to work on. Yesterday we had a meeting of the Tulare County Association of Governments. It was announced at the meeting the California Transportation Commission approved some significant Tulare County projects. The widening from Tagus to Prosperity was awarded, and that's a $74 million project. So we will be at Tulare city limits. Well, it's already working there, but we will be through the city of Tulare, hopefully in the near future. But it's a very big win for Tulare County to get this widening project moving forward, especially in a time when widening projects are out of favor in the state of California. Another important project in the community of Tipton was the $11 million bridge replacement project that was going to be taking place at Avenue 152 on that bridge over State Route 99. That project will be constructed and will be built with the anticipation of the widened 99 freeway through the community of Tipton. So that's a big win for the community of Tipton. I know that the Avenue 152 bridge is a very important access route for the South County, and there's also some safety issues there. So it's a great thing to have that project be approved and be moving forward. Lastly, I wanted to thank the Sheriff's Department and make a plug for their effort to give away masks and food. I know Supervisor Valero mentioned the event in London last week. Tonight from 5 to 7 at the Waukena School, the Sheriff's Department will be doing the same thing in the community of Waukena. I think that's a great project and very much needed and appreciated. So thank you to the Sheriff's Department. That concludes Board of Supervisors matters, and we will now move back to the agenda and on to item number 2, which is a request to receive an update from the Health and Human Services Agency on COVID-19 status and response efforts in Tulare County. Mr. Lutz.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, CEO, and council. I'm here today for my weekly COVID update for the board. So first starting off, as we normally do, talking about our kind of case trends, we showed cases rising, I think roughly at the same level we've seen over the last few weeks. Seem to be within the 10 to 25% growth range. The cases for this last week were, as of this morning, 12,718. Which is a 10.1% increase over last week. Unfortunately, we did pass a sad milestone last week where we surpassed 200 deaths within the county. Currently, we're at 206 deaths, which is an additional 8 from last week. We also, on the positive side, are at 11,203 recoveries. So looking at our weekly trends, we did show a large jump last week, but also to some level it was an anticipated larger jump that we'd been talking about for the last 2 weeks. So last week's 1,589 total cases, which is a 42% increase over the prior week. However, as we know and we talked about last week, we did get a very large number for the state's data correction that really reflected some cases from the prior 2 weeks as well, maybe even into the 3-week mark. So trying to look at the data in both ways, we know that we had a dip down, a relatively large dip down in our cases the first 2 weeks. This week, it was up again. Looking at the average between those 3 weeks, just trying to kind of get a baseline, because what I'm kind of looking at and where I think the important piece that we want to start to identify is on our trending, looking at that prior week's high, which was the week of July 27th, where we had the 1,638 cases. Looking at the average over the last 3 weeks, it's 1,306 cases. Which is roughly 20% lower than our July 27 high. So trying to kind of sort through and decipher where we're going, it does continue to appear that we are having a decrease in the number of weekly cases, which is definitely the direction we want to see things move in. Our case rate also, again, not surprisingly, did show an increase from the prior weeks. However, there was still concern that our rate last week was understated. So we went from 471.9 per 100,000 to 563 per 100,000. Now that is going to be very sensitive to, that's based on the report date. So it is going to be sensitive to what we received more recently than spread over when the actual episode or either the test was taken or the illness onset if they have it. So we are still, when we look at comparing that number that we've been tracking While it definitely is still high, it also does seem to be at least leveling off. And ideally then, if we continue the trend of fewer cases on a weekly basis, we will start to see that gradually decline. Testing positivity for last week, unfortunately, is showing an increase over the prior week. We went from a lagged positivity of 10.9% to unlagged estimate this week of 14.5%. We would expect, of course, that rate to continue to adjust downward as more of the labs come in. But I will say, in looking at kind of our comparison of state data, our testing positivity locally does remain a significant issue based on data from the state. And trying to do an apples-to-apples comparison of their metrics, we're showing the second highest positivity in the state behind Kern County at this point. So that testing positivity continues to be a huge concern for us, given just the testing volume. Our effective right now is calculating at 1.02, which is a decrease from where we started the beginning of the month at 1.13. This rate is indicative of a stabilization, or at least where we would expect a leveling of growth, where one person typically infects one additional person, and we don't see again, we don't see those massive increases in cases that we start to get when it's well above 1. So taken together, the trending overall is indicative of slowly stabilizing growth in cases, with the important caveat that that's given current circumstances. And so really the path forward, or the direction things go, is going to continue to be entirely driven by our local efforts on adhering to social distancing, masking, avoiding gatherings, and those things. If we continue to increase our efforts and diligence there, will impact and result in a faster decline in our case rate, and really the return to in-class instruction for our schools. The most promising area that I think we're seeing numbers in is our hospitalizations. Those showed a sizable decrease over last week, going from 98 to 68 hospitalizations for COVID positive individuals. That represents a 30% decrease. Those hospitalizations are now in line with what we were seeing mid-July, before we had our recent heavy wave of new cases. And certainly this is in part a result of having the Porterville Alternative Care Site and being able to discharge lower acuity individuals to that facility, in addition to skilled nursing facilities now starting to work through their process and taking more discharges from the hospitals. But it's definitely a positive sign of where things are going, given the current circumstances, and hopefully that's taking the staffing pressures off of the hospitals, so that their staff have a chance to breathe a little bit. And I would note also, looking at our modeling, the models for hospital forecasting are also showing by and far a slow reduction in hospitalizations in the near term. The big activity for last week, as both the chair and vice chair alluded to, is the state's unified support team visit. Also, our feeling and takeaway overall was that it was a very productive, long 2 days, but productive. We did have representatives from Cal OES, Department of Public Health, Department of Social Services, Department of Agriculture, Cal OSHA, and a couple other department representatives that came down and were in attendance. And fortunately, and I think importantly, we had a broad representation from county departments, cities, tribal representatives, community-based organizations, and our business partners. So the most attended topics or discussions prior week were farm worker outreach and engagement, and then general community outreach strategies and next steps. Some key highlights, I think a lot of these highlights are ones that, being in the thick of it, probably are not as much of a surprise to a number of us, but I think it's also important for the state partners to be able to hear this message, and from our feedback, I think they're hearing some consistent messages across the Central Valley, which also isn't entirely surprising. Some of those key points on business and industry noted the issues of just way too much noise or conflicting information and guidance coming out for businesses to really effectively comply with regulations. There definitely was discussion in a few sessions on the concern of the perceived heavy hand with the state strike teams. And in fact, the lead for the strike teams made the comment that it was really, in his opinion, an ill-conceived name for the strike teams because it conveys something that he doesn't feel that the intent of the strike teams was, which is to come in with that heavy enforcement side. Businesses also noted that need for additional and consistent messaging supporting the risks of gathering outside of the workplace. I know there was a lot of discussed frustration on businesses doing everything they can to come into compliance, but again, they're not going to be able to control what their employees do after hours. On our communities, just general broad community and community response, definitely highlighted the fear in some of our communities about engaging with government organizations, being tested, receiving services, and strategies for overcoming those types of barriers. A lot of frustration in the new testing guidance and pullback of testing criteria that is moving away from testing asymptomatic to going back to the symptomatic individuals. Obviously, the frustration in test results and the delays in getting those back, and the need for more culturally competent messaging and outreach throughout our communities. The schools was represented mostly by Tim Heyer, Superintendent of Schools for the county. And I think he did a good job of kind of summarizing a lot of the district concerns and really a growing level of frustration from the school districts, both on communication and issuance of guidance from the state and inconsistencies with that guidance, such as not allowing in-person instruction, but allowing day camps or day cares to be on site. There's also some concerns on long-term damage to infrastructure that really supports the education system. A good example would be some of the extra day programs that run in tandem with schools that this year are not operating, and to try and rebuild some of that infrastructure with a year of basically it being shut down is some significant concerns. That's going to take time to get those back in place. And we did talk about some of the equity concerns and really the smaller districts with less robust infrastructure for social distance learning, not social distancing, for distance learning, and then also a lack of consistency what that in-home instruction might be for students, whether or not the parent could be in the household to even help support their learning. So quite a few notes and concerns about the impacts to our families across the county with schools not allowing in-person instruction. The cities also noted concerns where they feel at the state level there hasn't been a lot of discussion or input and guidance from the city's perspectives on when new orders are issued and how those impact cities. And the frustration on the testing availability and being able to test broader groups of their staff with critical infrastructure. Hospitals and healthcare noted, of course, the lack of staffing as their most significant obstacle, next to then the supplies for mostly their testing at this point, where they have either rapid tests but they can't get the cartridges. They want to do additional laboratory tests through other collection means, and there's been some diversion at the federal level on some testing supplies where an order is in process and then it gets diverted. Also, still concerns about PPE and other ancillary types of equipment like HEPA filters. And then on testing, not to belabor the point, but clearly highlighting the significant supply chain issues. And I think there was a good discussion in terms of the heavy reliance on commercial laboratories and what that's done in terms of derailing the progress everyone was making. I think Quia Delta most articulated it the best, where they discussed that opportunity to really build on local capacity. I think our own public health lab is a prime example where we started at 50 tests per day and continue week after week to find new ways to efficiently process, to ramp up our level of testing. And I think Quia Delta is in a similar spot, although they have a little more of a challenge getting some of the critical supplies that they need for testing. And really, it's the challenges to relying on a model of testing that wasn't designed for the volume that COVID-19 is throwing at it. So as both the chair and vice chair noted, at the conclusion of the event, the state did note many strengths in the community response. They were impressed with the engagement of a broad coalition of community-based organizations, labor groups, and industry in coordinating the response. This week, Kings County has its site visit, and then once all those are completed, that's where we're looking for that action plan for the valley, and looking forward to seeing what those recommendations are and a broader discussion about more targeted response that is tailored more toward the Central Valley and some of our unique needs and challenges. So moving on then just to general DOC operations activities, the Porterville Alternative Care Site current census is 13. Again, that's going back into that low census range. We're still being told that they're not considering closing it yet, that we would probably be given that it is, I think, the only alternative care site that's state operated within the Central Valley. I think it will probably be one of the last, if not the last, of those alternative care sites to be shut down, but certainly the census still remains low. Total cumulative patients that we've had go through the facility is 76, and unfortunately, there were 2 deaths. The remaining others had been discharged. Remdesivir continues to come in, and the effective treatments on the hospitals, although again, still doing some level of speculation, but certainly the fact that our ventilator usage has been significantly lower than expected based on what they saw in New York. There is definitely some speculation on the remdesivir impacts on those highest impacted individuals. So that's definitely a promising piece. We know we've been utilizing remdesivir. It wasn't available in New York early on during the pandemic, and our ventilator usage is significantly different from what they were seeing in that state. And then for Department of Defense Hospital staffing, Quia Delta continues to have the 20-person team at this point scheduled to be on site through August 28th. And I believe the hospital's evaluating whether to put in another request. On industry and community liaisons, we continue to do a lot of training. At this point, we're doing weekly trainings for businesses. We're doing weekly trainings for schools and childcare facilities. I'm trying to tailor those to those specific industries. Again, I think that's been very effective at disseminating information, letting them ask questions, and continuing to keep those smaller cohort groups coming through to receive various levels or types of training based on their needs.
Tim, quick question before you leave that. I know you're providing trainings, and I understand what those would be like for businesses, but what kind of trainings are you providing for schools that aren't able to provide in-person instruction? Is it just in preparation for when they get back?
Some of it, like contact tracing process, what that looks like effectively for schools to be reopened. One of the big concerns that certainly health departments have is if we have large outbreaks, that could quickly overwhelm the contact tracing. Schools, because they keep the attendance logs, they have strict requirements on knowing where their students are, where their teachers are. They're best equipped to do a lot of that. Certainly the contact tracing and investigation piece that they're on site and have that information. So that's part of it. Part of it's if it's a smaller school, maybe they need just more resources on mitigation strategies for, how do you socially distance students, do disease spread management, those types of discussions as well.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor.
Are like the waiver process and procedures in helping school districts kind of prepare for that in the case when we're allowed to open up, that schools will then have that opportunity prior to?
All of those, yeah, they would encompass, when you look at what the waiver process really is asking for, is give us the school readiness plan. So addressing issues like how will you, if you have an exposure, quickly identify, where that student was, what the proximity to others are, kind of that step-by-step contact investigation, and then the tracing process. So, and then of course, what types of modifications might you need to make? What do the guidelines say in regard to class sizes, those types of things. So absolutely, it's part and parcel of what that waiver will need to be on schools' readiness when they can open to in-person. And again, we've tried to keep that, I think, an open dialogue. The team has continues to talk to the different schools, identify if there's more topics or different types of needs that they might need to provide guidance or training on. On the operation areas, or just operations activities, I should say, our outreach to underserved areas, small rural communities, and other testing deserts in the county continues to make some progress, despite some concerns on the new state testing guidelines and how we incorporate surveillance into that. We had to postpone our second Allensworth event due to the heat and having staff outside doing the collections. We have an early Mart event scheduled for August 26th. We're continuing to monitor the weather and try and make a decision this week on needing to modify that time if the current temperatures continue to stay as high as they are. And what we're doing is conducting a further analysis of testing deserts across the county, looking at our epidemiological data. We knew South County along that 99 corridor because we had the Optum sites in Porterville and Dinuba. We had pretty broad testing in the Visalia area, and we knew that a key area where we had very little focused testing was in our South Valley, but we're continuing to look now at some of those smaller pocket communities that transportation's an issue, that just getting out because of working families is an issue, and trying to then expand our mobile testing with our FQHC partners across the county. And speaking of testing, we're also in the process of nothing like a heat wave in the valley to show the state what we were saying to begin with, which is you probably don't want to put the OptumServe sites outside. So we finally have the momentum to move OptumServe sites inside, and are in the process of making that transition. So then closing on the finance, we are at $4.621 million for incident costs. I also wanted to highlight the Paycheck Protection Program Health Care Enhancement Act Within that, California received additional epidemiological and laboratory capacity funding. That was discussed with the rollout of the unified support teams. We've been waiting for kind of the guidance of what exactly that money looks like, what the timelines are. Positive, our allocation is higher than we originally expected. We were expecting around $5.5 million, and our allocation is $8.548 million. Also positive is that the spending threshold for that is November 17th of 2022. So we have much more time to be able to plan for those monies. They are very specific or narrowly focused on testing capacity, contact tracing, and support for epidemiological analysis. And what we're then planning to do is initial ramp up for where we can on testing infrastructure, but then programming those funds out between agency and our partners to be able to really get us through the significant wave of COVID even into the end of next year. So that's the plan right now. We're now that we have that guidance, we're in the process of mapping out the budget. And then lastly, for the Project Room Key, we currently have 107 individuals that are being served, provided last week 474 nightly rooms, total invoice costs $598,491. And of significant note, we took over the lease for a master lease for 99 Palms on August 11th and are in process of transitioning those daily tasks required for running the facility with our contracted partners. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, Supervisor Townsend.
Thanks, Tim, for the report this morning. As always, the great job that you guys are doing. One of the last things you talked about was that addition, the $8 million, which was higher than we thought it was going to be, and that was specifically for the targeted funds that were coming down. And you said that the lion's share of that's going for contact tracing, and that it would be extended all the way into 2022. Did I hear that right?
That is correct.
Now, wasn't that supposed to be targeted towards farm workers, towards providing support for farm workers, getting them out of the fields if they're sick, that type of thing?
That was the original hope, and unfortunately, when I think the Unified Support Team announcement came out and the new monies came out, it was crafted very broadly to support those efforts. And I think a lot of us made assumptions that to fully support those efforts, we need more than just testing. While testing is definitely a problem, more concerning, I think, is if you have a positive test, what resources can you provide to be able to help that person not continue to work, not be in the community, and to recover at home. So that was when the Unified Support Team announcements came out, very broadly stated of one of the goals of the funds. But unfortunately, as we saw the allocation, we learned it's far more narrow in terms of what we can apply it for.
So we won't have the ability then to direct those funds to helping farm workers that are sick stay home. All we'll be able to do is tell that, oh, you're sick, but we won't give them anything to help them stay home.
So we do have funds within our CARES Act for rental assistance, food assistance, utility assistance that we are targeting toward that population. We were hoping for more through this. Right. So what we're trying to do is a bit of a shuffle of some of the funds that we were using in CARES Act that support like our public health laboratory, contact tracing. We want to now apply toward this pot of funds to then make sure we're freeing up dollars within our CARES Act allocation for just those purposes you're asking about.
Okay, and that's the good news part of it, that we can use the other funds. But I thought that the philanthropic money that was added to the funds that the state was sending were specifically for support of farm workers.
So the philanthropic, we haven't been told how those would be spent. My assumption is the same. Those should be pretty broad. The business, if they're donating it, or industry, they can put stipulations on it, but I think they've left it pretty broad. It certainly isn't going to be as narrowly focused as these monies coming down from the CDC. And I think that's the challenge, is because these came from CDC, they are a little more narrowly focused on what those types of activities would be.
Or maybe a lot more narrowly focused,
Yeah.
sounds like. And not to belabor the point any, but November of 2022, what was the point of extending contact tracing that long?
I don't know where that date came from. That's an excellent question, because it doesn't align with a year mark of anything. It doesn't seem to coincide certainly with any fiscal year end, whether it be federal, state, or other. So I'm not certain what the significance of that date is.
Well, I mean, and it's potentially, I mean, it's over 2 years out, so it's almost certainly way beyond the vaccine date when a vaccine's available nationwide.
Assuming they do have a successful vaccine, absolutely.
Which was
I
pretty
would hope.
promising, it sounds like, but okay, that just is a very strange, but I guess it's the state, so I shouldn't be surprised that they would do something like that. Thank you.
All right, Supervisor, are you done?
I'm done.
Supervisor Townsend?
For
Okay.
now.
Supervisor Crocker?
Thank you, Tim, for the update. I appreciate all your work with schools. I know it's tough, but I think working with them and trying to figure out some ways that they can do what they think is best is crucial. You know, we talked a lot about testing, and statewide we've had limitations. Are you seeing anything change as far as whether or not we're going to be able to open and remove some of those limitations, those prioritizations on testing, and be able to start going back to the general public?
We haven't yet. Certainly, that was a broad discussion last week, and I think the state did a lot of listening, not as much, talking in terms of what's happening or commitments. The advantage having a staff person, our public health lab manager, who's on the state testing task force, usually she can hear information coming down. I know that we're slowly seeing some improvements on turnaround times. Our Optum sites, I think, are averaging about 3-4 day turnaround, which is far better than it was, still not great. And then various commercial labs. Their plan is they're trying to do some pooled testing that we brought up, and I know other counties have brought up. With the commercial lab set up the way it is, you have a lot of our tests going down to Southern California. So you add at least a day for travel at a minimum up front, and that doesn't even include then their backlog on processing. So they're trying to work with those commercial labs and kind of map out where samples ought to be going within that region to try and speed things up. That's where we had that discussion, and I felt was a good push of there's a lot of capacity that we could be leveraging locally with our with Quia Delta, with our public health lab, that then we have faster turnaround times and more control. So I think my hope, I should say, is that it's a both and of the states trying to work on their side for what the commercial lab processing structure is, but they also either support through funding or continued efforts to expand local capacity.
So what are we going to need to see to open it back up, or as far as, allowing general public, whether asymptomatic individuals, to be able to test? What type of backlog or lack of backlog do we, because that was basically a local decision that we decided that we needed to start prioritizing and saying just, certain individuals, and we're going to keep those tests for them.
Well, actually, the state task force did issue new guidelines that basically specified what we needed to do. We locally, our public health lab tried to align itself as best we can, but we've also tried to make some exceptions. Prime example is our surveillance activities in Allensworth, Early Martin, other areas. Right now, technically is is not aligned with what the guidelines are, but recognizing the importance of having surveillance, we've continued to do it. So it is still state dictated, unfortunately, and they haven't indicated what exactly they're looking for on turnaround times. Certainly getting back into that 3-4 day turnaround times for the commercial labs are important. But the other piece is getting supplies for some of the rapid tests that our hospitals have, that others have, because of the importance to the hospital operations of being able to test their staff quickly, be able to test somebody going into surgery quickly, all of those things that have that domino effect.
And just shifting gears a little bit, and I think on a little bit of a bright note, skilled nursing homes, you know, we haven't seen any major outbreaks over the last month. Things seem to be fairly stable. What's changed? What's going on? Are they just implementing procedures better? We have closer tap on that?
Probably a little bit
Out
of
patients to have infected.
Well,
a little bit of both, I think. We definitely, the education, the outreach engagement with skilled nursing facilities on proper protocols, better disease management, making sure that they have a disease investigator on staff that's really tasked with evaluating their business process and ensuring that they're doing things that are not spreading the disease. We've had some areas where we had so many positives that we could turn a facility into really a COVID positive facility, where then we could shift patients to there and specifically address their needs without as much risk of infecting others. And then we do weekly check-ins with them. The state's been on site. Early on, we had the state liaison from the community care and licensing and also infectious disease in the county making the rounds, and I think that does certainly help to make sure that they're adhering.
good. Thank you.
Right, Supervisor Valero?
Yes, all right. So after hearing the conversation with my colleague Townsend just now, and thank you for bringing that to our attention with regards to our farm worker community, I think that the word of the day now is alignment. And so how are we going to align our testing dollars with our CARES Act? And so just making sure, again, that we're creating those partnerships with our ag commissioner as well as with our rental and mortgage assistance. So I believe that now that we're kind of ending towards the latter half of our program for small business grants, that we can now bring the mortgage and rental assistance that we have allocated to the forefront, so that way we can begin to really make sure that those resources are available, especially at this time. So again, just making sure that we are aligning our funds and the pots of money, so that way we can distribute them efficiently, effectively from here on forward.
And if the board would like, we could certainly also bring in a presentation specifically tailored toward the different pots of money, where it's going, because I think that's a crucial point on the alignment. Our Community Care Coalition is certainly was conceived with that in mind too, of a lot of money coming down from a variety of sources. How do we best ensure that all of those providers are talking, coordinating, not tripping over one another? And I think that's an essential question, and we'd be happy to provide a broader overview of that if the board wishes.
Thank you.
Supervisor Townsend?
Yeah, Tim, just one other quick question. It was back to the, on the report that you sent us, the SAS system, that spreadsheet. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between, our case rate per 100,000 shows up on that as 360.4. On our situation report yesterday was 563. So it's pretty, and that's, of course, I like the SAS one better on that one.
Don't we all?
But when it comes to the positivity, the 7-day, The SAS shows 17, ours shows 10 as of
So
yesterday.
if you, and a prime example, and I apologize not having the slide to pop up, but on our cumulative case rate per 14 days, the comparison of those two curves is showing the difference, and it's about the methodology difference and how the state calculates. We're calculating on date received versus incident date. Incident date can significantly understate early on. And you'll kind of see that if you watch that curve over time. You could see where most of the time it's been higher or lagging a little higher than ours. And because it's taking the most recent incidents only, I know our epidemiological folks have some issues with this, and it came up on our state call yesterday when the monitoring list came back out, and the states acknowledged that there is, talk about alignment or misalignment in terms of how the counties often are calculating their information and how the state's doing it. What we are assured at this point is for our school reopening criteria, the SAS sheet that you have is actually what the state's currently using. From our perspective then, even though, and this was a specific question from another county, is I want to make sure that the state is going to be on board with the fact that locally we're calculating a higher rate per 100,000 than the state's putting on their sheet. But if we're going to reopen schools based on the state criteria, I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page with that. And I think that caused a little bit of concern and question. So my understanding is they're going to be digging deeper into the data. This has been something that I know locally we've complained about early on some of those disconnects on the state data. And so hopefully there'll be a little more uniformity or consistency, because I hate having two numbers out there that creates confusion. And so that's why we opted to start kind of showing where the state's numbers are, and you can see that orange line on the sheet, and then the blue line of what we're calculating.
Yeah, and that's and so you're anticipating that those things will kind of come together as we get further away from the state's screw up on the server.
They'll never align just based on, if you're backcasting basically your information based on how quickly the labs come in. If all labs were returned within a day, we'd be pretty darn close on that alignment. But because of those delays in labs, that's where you start to see it better. You could see the curve was much more aligned early on, but when it really started to deviate is when we started to get these large gaps or delays in lab results from the commercial labs.
Thank you.
All right, I have a couple questions, comments for you, Tim. First of all, thank you for the very detailed report. I appreciate the information. I know you mentioned the R effective, kind of glossed over that. I know that that was a pretty determining factor or indicator of how your jurisdiction was doing according to the state, and so I just wanted to go back there real quick. And if you look at the data, and on August 1st, the state of California was at 1.0. Today they're at 1.07. Tulare County was at 1.13 at that time. Today we're at 1.07. I'm sorry, 1.02. When you look at that, can you really interpret that or reach into that or judge based on that too much, or is that just simply the 2-week snapshot that we shouldn't get too excited about? Because, just from looking at that snapshot, you would say, well, we're actually, at first we came out and Tulare County's caseload was pretty darn high in this state. We were considered a hotspot from the start. And today we're doing better than the state average. So maybe the outbreak was more severe, more intense here initially, and now it's leveling off and Tulare County's got brighter days ahead. Would you be hesitant to interpret that or look into it that way that I just did?
The R effective has been one that, and you are correct in noting that I kind of went through that quickly.
Yeah, because I mean, it was brought up and created to be such a spectacular indicator, and now it just seems like it's just a data
Problem
point.
is it's really great at telling you history, and it's
Okay.
really great at telling you kind of where you are, and that's where I put that caveat of, if we continue to do what we're doing today,
Yeah.
then what you said is an accurate statement. That's what we would expect. The challenge is, it does seem to, of all the measures, it does seem to vary pretty significantly from week to week.
Okay.
And it's been one that early on I felt it was a good optimistic view, but I've just seen it really, fluctuate so wildly that because it's backcasting. I do think looking at where our case rates are, coupled with our positivity, is telling us kind of the direction. Seeing that our case rates are declining, I think is the best indication for me, and it's reflected in the R effective number. That's why it's saying, stabilizing, but so much is dependent on, do we have a big event or a holiday? I know we have
Labor Day.
Exactly. We have Labor Day coming up, and that's that last, week of summer, last party of summer, so to speak, and worrying about what kind of get-togethers, we'll have, and what new clusters that we could see from that.
Well, and clearly, I mean, the message isn't, okay, guys, we're getting better, let's, let up. I think that we have to remain diligent and do what we can to control this, because I think one thing that we are all seeing is there's one population group that's really suffering in Tulare County, and it's not being highlighted really anywhere, and that's school-aged kids. School-aged kids that are not in schools today, learning in person and are learning at home, maybe with a bad internet signal or a lack of an internet signal because of location in an unincorporated area. There's just a lot of different issues surrounding that population, and I just really hope that the state of California reevaluates the guidance for schools and provides for some local autonomy and local flexibility, because the issues surrounding our school children here in Tulare County are far different than the issues surrounding school children, say, in Marin County or in San Francisco. So, I mean, have you heard anything that gives any hope for school children to getting back on campus? Can you give an update on the waivers, maybe, and guidance there? Something that would kind of give the board some feedback, because I'm getting calls and texts about the waiver process and what the county is doing, and how can parents weigh in on our actions to get kids back in school.
Yeah, unfortunately, in terms of the first part of your question on hope, I wish I had more hope at this point, or I've heard more hope of changes. I know it was a point that we tried to stress both in the schools session with the Unified Support Team, but also in kind of the wrap-up of, we can't apply the one-size-fits-all approach in anything in this state, and I feel schools are no different. The challenges, I'm not certain at the state level what all factors continue to result in seemingly no movement. We haven't heard any, movement or changes from the state on that. Locally on the waivers, I know our team has been meeting with schools. I apologize for not having updated statistics on that, and I'd be happy to make sure I highlight that in next week's report, because I do think it's now that more schools are virtually in session, I think we're going to see more and more of those impacts and the stressors on families. As I noted to the state, I'm acutely aware of the mental health and child welfare status of our kids at home without those extra supports that they receive at a school-based setting.
Yeah, thank you. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention was public health. I had the opportunity to go down to the public health lab last week, and recognize them, and I thought that was a really great effort for the board to be able to go and show some gratitude and appreciation to our public health lab staff. I thought that it was great to meet the team that is really, you think to yourself that they're kind of off in a lab or in a basement somewhere, and they really kind of are. They're the group of people that you don't see very often, but to be able to show them recognition and to appreciate the work that they've done, because where they started when this whole pandemic began to where they are today, and the amount of tests they're processing and the efficiency within which they're operating, I think is really something to be commended. So got to see that staff and recognize them last week, but please do pass on our thanks to them continually, and also our thanks to the rest of your staff that's working so diligently to help us navigate Tulare County's way through this pandemic. I appreciate it.
We have a lot of those silent warriors, so to speak, in this battle on COVID, our lab staff, our public health nursing staff, that, again, work in tireless hours trying to keep up with the volume coming at them.
Surely. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Tim. Okay, now we will continue on with our agenda and take up item 3, which is public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item within the jurisdiction of the Board of Supervisors, but not on today's agenda. I have numerous requests for item number 26. We will be pulling that for separate consideration. And then item 25, we have a request for that, and we will take that up at that time when we entertain the consent calendar. Are there any public comments related to any other item here today? Or any item not on the agenda today?
Mr. Chair, we do have some phone comments.
Okay, you can go ahead. Anyone in person here today first before we go to the phone? Okay, seeing no one, let's go ahead and bring on the phone comment.
Good morning. Thank you for holding. You're now connected to the board meeting. Please state your name and address for the record. Your 3 minutes will begin now.
Good morning. This is Blanca Escobedo. I'm a policy advocate with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. I would like to comment that we are glad that HHSA is working on various programs using CARES funding to reach the most impacted communities in the county. The pandemic has created dire economic impacts, and thus rental and utility assistance is a great need in the county, specifically so for these essential workers such as farm workers, warehouse workers, and et cetera. We ask that the county maximizes the amount of CARES funding for these programs so that as many families can receive some sort of relief. As the details of this program are being developed, we urge the county to make sure that undocumented people and families are eligible. Undocumented workers make up a large portion of farm workers, and they sacrifice their health and bodies so that food can reach your plate. It's imperative that these essential workers are treated as such and can receive adequate outreach and engagement to ensure that they can apply for these funds, as well as to continue to supply PPE and workplace protections. We also request that the board and HHSA continues to work with impacted farm worker communities, community-based organizations, and landowners to have on-site testing on farms where it is most convenient to test farm workers. We also request that a schedule of mobile testing in the rural unincorporated communities be released as soon as it's available. These are all questions that we are getting from residents in these communities, and it is often hard to find this information online or to get a response from the county, as I'm sure everyone is really busy. So I have some questions that I hope will facilitate some discussion that can also be made, and that the answers can be made available to the public. So what are the reasons why public health hasn't been allowed on farm labor camps to do outreach and testing? What efforts are being made to persuade landowners to allow this? How can farm workers access temporary housing if they are infected in the case that HHSA hasn't conducted outreach to them yet? Is the farm worker housing program through Harvest for Housing being developed already, and how is HHSA incorporating those resources? What is the timeline for the rental and utility assistance program using CARES funding, and how much funding will be available for these programs respectively? So I hope these questions do facilitate the discussion, and that the county and the HHSA continue to work to to address all these impacts being made to the most vulnerable workers in the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional callers?
We do. Good morning. Thank you for holding. You're now connected to the board meeting. Please state your name and address for the record. Your 3 minutes will begin now.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Board of Supervisors. Thank you for the opportunity to make a public comment this morning. And mine is in regard to, and I'm sure you've heard this before, the need of funds for rents and utilities. It's a hardship also for those who can't pay their rent, but also for the owners. And God forbid that the people who have mortgages would lose their homes, being that we already have such a great amount of homelessness. And so, we would appreciate you taking that into consideration. And also the fact that we need more water, because we were donated water by Self-Help Enterprises for 3 months here in Pixley. And I myself am purchasing my own water right now, which has gotten quite costly. But, I have to do it. And I am on Social Security and disabled. This is why I'm on Social Security, because I can't work. And it's hard for me as one person that lives here, but I shudder to imagine what it's like for people who have large families. And I would really appreciate your consideration in these matters of the rent and the utility funds and the water. And thank you very much. I appreciate you listening to me this morning.
Thank you for your comment.
Mr. Chair, that concludes public comment.
Okay. Any additional public comments from anyone here in the audience today? All right. I will now close the public comment period and bring it back to our agenda. We will move on to the consent calendar. We have several changes on the consent calendar. Item 25, there's a request for public comment. We will pull that. Item 26 will be pulled also. Number 8 will be off agenda. Number 9 will be pulled for separate action. Number 14 will be pulled for separate action. And then number 32, if anyone has any questions, Karen Elliott is available for Zoom or via Zoom. So, I'm just saying I was on my list of the changes. So, item 8 is off. 9 is pulled, 14 is pulled, and 26 is pulled, and 25 and 26 are pulled. Okay.
I would...
Any public comments or other items for separate consideration? You want to pull the rest of the consent calendar? Okay. Go ahead, Supervisor. Okay. Do you just want to make a comment right now? You can go ahead and make a comment on 19. That's fine.
And 19 is the Farm to Market 2.0. Just wanted to, that's a $10 million advance from Measure R. Just happy to see it come about, something that the board took up and TCAG took up a while back. I think it's just so important that we do that at this point in time, and to get out there and start getting ahead of some of the problems. With the roads, it will become a worse problem if we waited. So I thought it was a great move by the board and the Tulare County Association of Governments, and happy to see it come through today.
And I think on item 14, we'll just take a comment. We don't need to pull that for separate action. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that's something I had requested. I just want to bring light to this. It's a $4 million grant from the Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commission to accept this award on behalf of Mental Health Student Services Act. I just want to say, right now, it's not, since the kids aren't in school, they won't be able to receive these services, but I think it's very important. I think our schools are our front line of defense to reach students who are experiencing mental health issues, which can lead to suicide, dropout, and whatnot. So I just want to highlight that partnership, and I think it's a tremendous value in working with the schools.
Okay, is there any additional comment or item to be pulled for separate consideration? If not, the chair will entertain a motion on the balance of the consent calendar, less items 8, 9, and 25 and 26. Okay, we have
Second.
a motion from Supervisor Townsend, a second by Supervisor Shuckling. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 unanimous. We will now take up item 9. This was pulled for separate action. I know the vendor will be calling in to make comments.
My name is Lauren Guilfoy. I am the program director for Aspirinet's Tulare and Kings County Transitional Housing Plus programs, more commonly referred to as the THP Plus program. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today in regards to the agreement before you for Aspirinet's delivery of THP Plus program services for young adults who were formerly in foster care. It is my belief that the 26% reduction in funding for this current fiscal year as compared to the last will have a lasting negative impact on one of our most vulnerable populations. I hope to have a few of our participants present today to speak on behalf of the way this program has positively impacted their ability to successfully transition to adulthood. However, they are currently working or attending school. They are taking full advantage of the stability a program such as this one provides. As an agency, we are extremely concerned about the potential lasting impacts of the reduction in funding here. In Tulare County, we have been contracted for the last several years to provide housing and supportive services to 9 young adults who have aged out of foster care. We have almost always had a wait list. Some applicants have had to wait a year or more before an opening in our program was available. With the current allocation, we will only have the ability to serve 7 young adults. In 2018, according to kidsdata.org, there were 228 individuals in foster care between the ages of 16 to 20 in Tulare County. While this statistic is a couple of years old, it is safe to say that a large number of them will soon turn 21 and leave the safety net of services provided by the child welfare system. Our THP Plus program is one of very few places that they can turn to for continued support. It is worrisome that we will only be able to support 7 of them at any given time. I'm not sure about you all, but I know that I didn't have it all together at 21. While you or I might have been able to call our parents for help when we were in our early 20s and running a little short on rent or facing a big decision in our education or career, that is not typically an option for former foster youth. Programs like THP Plus serve as a surrogate parent in many ways. We not only provide tangible support such as housing, we also provide guidance and help our participants navigate the trials and tribulations of adulthood. Those who have experienced foster care are far more likely to have negative outcomes as adults. They're much more likely to experience homelessness, live below the poverty line, and even end up incarcerated as compared to their non-foster peers. They have the odds stacked against them from the beginning. While the long-term effects of the COVID-19 pandemic have yet to be seen, I think we can all agree that it will only contribute to the list of barriers that these individuals must overcome. I know the decision to make the cut in funding was not made without careful consideration, review, and thought from all those involved. However, as an advocate for this population of truly inspirational and resilient young adults who oftentimes don't have a voice, I ask you, as representatives of our community, to reconsider this reduction. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Supervisor Shuckling?
I think I have a question, maybe Anita? I mean, I know I have a question. So, Anita, was this cut made due to the funding on our part, or some funding from the state that's been reduced for this program?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I do thank you for the opportunity to respond this morning around the reduction. In 2021, I'm sorry, in 1920, we funded this contract at $234,000. For this coming year, we're going to be funding it for $195,000. We were given an opportunity to receive an additional grant, and so the actual cut is actual 16%. In the past, on this allocation, they have not fully expended their contract. They've been about 90% expended and been serving about 8 to 10 foster youth in that older age group. So we are still going to be able to provide that service. I also just want to share that this was a cut that we made across all of our contracts in light of changes to realignment. We had to make some conservative decisions. So they were not the only contracted provider that received a cut.
All right, thank you. And unfortunately, I think with what's happening, in the state right now, we're going to be seeing a lot of this. So I appreciate, you taking a look at it. It does seem like we will be able to serve the same amount of folks. I want to thank AspiraNet for all that they do, because this is a very vulnerable population. 8 to 10 folks doesn't seem like a lot, but again, when you've aged out and you don't have anywhere to go or funding, it's very important to have this safety net. So thank you, Anita.
Thank you.
Okay, are there additional public comments on this item?
No phone comments.
Okay. Board, how would we like to proceed?
I will hesitantly move approval.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Shucklian. Second by Supervisor Valero. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 unanimous. We will now move on and take up our next consent item that was pulled for separate consideration, item number 25. Item number 25, we have a public comment on this item. Do you want to make any additional comments, Aaron? Or
Aaron Bach, Assistant Director, RMA. I'll respond to any comments made by anybody from the public.
Okay, great, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for holding. You're now connected to the board meeting. Please state your name and address for the record. Your 3 minutes will begin now.
Good morning. This is Blanca Escobedo with Leadership Council. We wanted to comment on this item to ask the board to not approve the categorical exemption for this project because of the potential adverse impacts it can have on the environment and communities. A project of these dimensions and impacts needs strong environmental review and demands that the public are aware of potential impacts. For one, pressurized pipelines are a major risk for gas leaks and explosions that can cost lives, millions of dollars of damage, further environmental degradation, and exacerbate climate change. In fact, a report recently came out demonstrating that methane leakage is more widespread and severe than previously understood. Additionally, expanded biogas infrastructure will necessarily lead to larger dairies and further concentration of dairies to produce the more manure to fill the pipelines. More cows and more dairies further contaminate the water, pollute the air, create more methane and greenhouse gas emissions, and exacerbate odors. Biogas is not the climate change solution that it paints itself to be. It's not a truly renewable energy source, and it's not a zero-emission fuel. Incentivizing the development of pipelines and biogas facilities will endanger communities living near this infrastructure and near the dairies that supply their fuel. To grant a categorical exemption would be irresponsible on behalf of the county, and we urge them to pursue with environmental review. Thank you.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Chairman, Supervisor, CAO, Council, I am Aaron Bach, Assistant Director with the Resource Management Agency. The county has historically approved such pipelines before with the same categorical exemptions without any opposition. This is for an agreement for an encroachment permit to allow these gas lines similar to any other gas line within the county or any other public utility within the county. So there's nothing new here. The county has already reviewed similar situations from our very first gas pipelines and found them consistent with this exemption. So I wouldn't say anything's different today from any other project we've done throughout this process. Plus, the gas lines themselves act as mitigation for the dairies through our ACFP, which was previously approved and sent to the commenter previously, so she is aware of that. So again, nothing new here. If anything, this is a benefit to the county.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Any further public comment on this item?
That concludes public comment.
Okay, bring it back to the board for action.
Move to approve and just state that this is, as Mr. Bach stated, it is it's a benefit. We're reducing methane. California Air Resources Board agrees with that, and this is overall a very positive thing.
Here we have a motion by Supervisor Shucklian, I'm sorry, by Supervisor Crocker, second by Supervisor Shucklian. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 unanimous. Next, we will take up item 26. This was pulled. I have numerous public comment requests, and I will take up the public comment on this before the board adjourns to closed session on this item. I have a request first from Diana McKay.
Thank you for letting me come and speak today. My name is Diana McKay. I live at 8639 Road 228 in Terabella. I'm here because I'm very concerned regarding Set and Pistachio expanding more land. Across the street from us, they've purchased more land. They're putting in pipeline to water more pistachios. And Friday, we were inundated with dust from getting the property ready for these trees. I ended up calling the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control. They sent a man up and to investigate. I had pictures of it. We have a video of it. It is horrendous. If you cannot burn on a poor air quality day, I don't understand why we can be subjected to this kind of treatment. The air was just, it was like dense fog. I'm not kidding you. On Saturday morning, the same thing appeared again. They were out plowing these fields. We've been subjected to the wastewater smell out there last year. It was horrendous. Couldn't have anything outside because of the smell. I'm concerned because I've dealt with health care. I worked for 22 years in an emergency room in Porterville. I'm concerned that I will get valley fever from the dust particles. I don't see that they're doing anything to keep the dust down. That yes, they had a water truck, but it wasn't on the field spreading it where they were turning the dirt under. It was horrendous. And I just don't feel that it's right for the neighbors, all of us out there, to be subjected time and time again to this corporation taking over every piece of land when we don't have any say about it. So that's why I'm here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next, I have a request from John Kinsey. I believe he's on Zoom.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak this morning. My name is John Kinsey. I represent Set and Pistachio of Terabella. And I wanted to clear up a few things, first of all, and also to address some of the items that are going to be in front of you this morning, some arguments that were made. We received a letter this morning from Terabella Voices for Change. And so I wanted to address those for the county and also provide some additional detail to hopefully allay some concerns. First of all, I did hear the last speaker. This project, of course, it doesn't have anything to do with expanding pistachio orchards. This is not building on any new land. This is actually, simply installing facilities there where Seton's existing facility is in Terabella. So there are no new fields that are being planted. So that's something that doesn't have anything to do with this particular project. This project is simply including those new facilities within its existing facility footprint. In addition, it includes installing a pipeline. And the pipeline's important because what the pipeline does, the purpose of the pipeline is to actually alleviate some of the odor concerns that the neighbors have raised. And in particular, the regional board has said that that with the installation, that with expanding the amount of crop acreage that can receive water from the facility, and I'm quoting here, that should reduce the facility's potential to generate objectionable odors that could impact nearby Terabella residents. So this project is actually very important to help allay the concerns that are being raised, both in the letter and I'm sure additional concerns regarding odor that you hear today. So obviously Seton really does want to have these this installed prior to harvest. That way it can help ensure that these ponds that the neighbors have raised concerns about will not include any additional odors. This is, obviously consistent with the land use that was contemplated in the Terabella specific community plan. Nothing we're doing is inconsistent with that, and all of the impacts that we're going to have any potential impacts that could be had were essentially addressed in that document. And so the issue isn't necessarily whether the expansion is minor or substantial. The issue is whether there will be new significant impacts that were not addressed in that prior study. And here we actually have many pages of analysis showing why that won't be the case. So, for example, with traffic and vehicle miles traveled, the study makes it quite clear that there will be no new VMTs, vehicle miles traveled. There were concerns about odors, and again, that's addressed in the document before your board. And this project is in large part to expand the land application area, which the regional board has found will reduce odors. So this is part of that effort to reduce potential odors. Finally, there was a note in some of the comments that were raised regarding piecemealing of the project. That's something that just isn't the case. The argument is that, well, at one time, Seton was requesting a revised waste discharge permit from the regional board, and that contemplated expanding the amount of water that came from the facility. Seton actually withdrew that permit. At this point, it has no intention of expanding the amount of water that's going to be released from the facility. And that's actually in large part due to some of the concerns that the neighbors raised. So what we did is we actually Seton committed to keeping the amount of water that's just discharged from the facility within what's currently permitted. So that doesn't have anything to do with this project. And at this point, Seton doesn't have any active plans to increase the amount of water that's discharged. Obviously, Seton wants to make sure that there's no odor impacts. It's been working with the regional board and with the other agencies to ensure that's the case. And that's been going, obviously we've been working cooperatively with them. So again, this is, this document shows that there will be no new significant impacts. That's the actual standard under CEQA. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on behalf of Seton.
Thank you for your comments. Madam Clerk, additional phone comments?
We do have 2 phone comments.
Okay.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you for holding. You're now connected to the board meeting. Please state your name and address for the record. Your 3 minutes will begin now.
Okay. Um, Good morning. My name is Nayamin Martinez. I work for the Central California Environmental Justice Network. My address is 2297 Goshen Avenue in Clovis, California, 93611. And I am calling to make the supervisors aware that since last year when we started implementing the IVAN reporting network in Tulare County, we have received numerous complaints from Terabella residents regarding not only the odor, but also flies and also the dust, as it was described previously. And all these are problems that are being caused by the way that Sedon Pistachio is operating in this community. Recently, they reached an agreement with the Regional Water Board, and despite that they said they don't have intentions to expand their operations, we know by talking to residents that the case is that they are indeed and going to expand their operations. So we're just urging supervisors to make sure that fully environmental impact reports are taken into consideration, and so most importantly, concerns of residents who live in this community day in and day out before any more permits are given to this facility that has a history of having completely disregard for their neighbors and their well-being. So on behalf of the residents of Terabella, we are urging the supervisors to not allow any more permits for this company until environmental impact reports are made to ensure that their practices, whatever they are not affecting the local residents. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and we look forward to collaborating with you for the well-being of Terabella and other residents of unincorporated communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comment?
We do have additional comments. Good morning. Thank you for calling. You're now connected to the board meeting. Please state your name and address for the record. Your 3 minutes will begin now.
Good morning. My name is Lupi, and I live on Road 234 in Terabella. Thank you, board, for taking my call. I do appreciate the time and the effort that's being put into this subject in regards to the expansion of the Sun Pistachio. I have been listening to the meeting this morning in regards to the gentleman that's representing the Sun Pistachio Corporation. You stated a few items on that you stated that Sutton has done and is continuing to do, that they're asking for no expansion of wastewater, and it's not the situation. They're expanding the organization to produce and to continuously make more pistachios to be able to package and sell and so on and so forth. So in order to continue to make more, you have to use more water. So when you use more water, that water is being used as waste. I live across the catty corner or downwind from the Sun Pistachio Pond. I am one of the residents that's highly impacted by the smell. Even currently as we speak, yes, the pond is drained. It still continues to have a smell and an odor. I also read the information that the water board had given a cease and desist order or something like that, asking them to stop. And here they go to the county and they're asking for permits for expansion. I asked the Board of Supervisors to please do not issue any extensions whatsoever, any permits, absolutely nothing to the Sutton Pistachio until you fully review absolutely every complaint that you receive from every single one of the community. There is a petition that was taken up and signed of 520 signatures that Sutton Pistachio has operated not as a good neighbor. It could be that they may be making the benchmark as an organization or a company, but as a neighbor, they're not being very well. I agree with Ms. Diana in regards to the dust. I also get excessive dust from the people preparing the land for more pistachio trees, the people preparing the land to do the irrigation with your wastewater. I also get dust when I go into our local little markets here in town to pick up groceries from the employees coming and going to the packing house as well as to the Sun Pistachio plant. Also, we have excessive traffic from employees of Sun Pistachio. We have forklifts, we have golf carts coming in and out of the street, driving in the middle of the street. There has been videos of even happening yesterday. So it's something that's continuously happening. So I ask the board to please evaluate every complaint. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any additional phone comments, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we have one additional.
So I ask the board to please evaluate every.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, okay. Good morning. Thank you for holding. You're now connected to the board meeting. Please state your name and address for the record. Your 3 minutes will begin now.
Thank you. Good morning, board. My name is Mariah Thompson. I am an attorney. I represent a community group in Terabella called Terabella Voice for Change. We have been very involved in the Terabella odor issue that's been going on for a couple years. We were one of the designated parties in the stipulated cease and desist order that was entered into between Seton and the Central Water Board on Thursday. Essentially, our community members and our members of our group have been very interested in the process. So we submitted a letter last night detailing the sufficient discrepancies between the project that's being proposed and the legal mandates that the county has under CEQA. We think there are very serious issues with the CEQA analysis that was conducted or that is being proposed. Principally, the project that is being proposed is an entirely different project than that which was evaluated in the mitigated negative declaration that the county is seeking to attach an addendum to approve this project. The original mitigated negative declaration evaluated an update to the Terabella Community Plan and explicitly stated at least 46 times within its initial study and mitigated negative declaration that it was not evaluating any individual development projects and that individual development projects would need to be evaluated at a later date in a separate environmental analysis. Yet this addendum, which contains an entirely different project description, which describes the project as an expansion project when the previous MND described its project as a community plan update, is proposing to install 24 silos, gas-fired heaters, fans, construction on the facility, and a new pipeline that Seton did not consult the Central Water Board before proposing in order to increase the land application order for the area for the project. And there will be significant environmental impacts from this project. One thing to state is that both the Central Water Board and Terabella Voice for Change, while negotiating the stipulated cease and desist order, did not contact us about this addendum or inform us in any way. We just found out a couple days ago that this was being proposed while they were allegedly negotiating in good faith. The other thing to know is that they have not demonstrated that they can operate at their current capacity without creating odors. The cease and desist order has only been in place for 3 business days, and yet they are stating in their alleged analysis of odor that they will be able to expand the facility without creating any odor impacts. The county may not approve this and be in compliance with CEQA and needs to do a full environmental analysis of this project as a separate project.
Thank
you for your comments. Anything additional, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chair, that concludes public comment on the phone.
Okay, any additional public comment from any member of the public in attendance here today? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. My name's Jeffrey Gibbons. I live at 312 Garnsey Avenue in Bakersfield. I'm the plant manager for Seton Pistachio, and we've been in Terabella since 1995. We continue just to do good work in Terabella. We do have a cease and desist order that is satisfied the water board that we will not have any odor. We're very confident with that. We've spent a lot of time and money dealing with the odor issue. That we did have an odor issue from the 2018 pistachio crop. We've solved that now. In the 2019 pistachio crop, we went through that without having just minimal odor, and we'll have even less odor this year, so we've really dealt with that issue. Any issue that comes up within with the facility in the county, we deal with it just as well as we can. We are a big employer in Tulare County, of course, as you know. The dust issue, that was just an issue that just happened on one night. We don't produce very much dust at all. We've never had complaints about dust. That was once every 120 years. We took out an olive orchard and we're planting pistachios on, it has nothing to do, like John said, with the expansion. It's just that we have an orchard that is close to the facility, and we had a disc running on Friday night that with an inversion later there was dust, and we'll try to mitigate that, but that's something that happens every 120 years when you replant an orchard. Last time that orchard was planted was in around 1900s. It's been 120 years, and the olive orchard was old, and it's not like we're going to have that happen every week. That's just a one-day activity that happened, and that's just something that we deal with. We will continue to do things right for the community, and we look forward to a positive response from the board, and I think we've got everything under control. The expansion of regarding the dust, that is just part of the right to farm. It had nothing to do with the facility at all, but it is a sister company that we are putting more planning on planting some pistachio trees. We have to disc the field prior to that activity. With the and I guess that's about the end of my time, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
Good morning. My name is Fernando Rios. I'm the Regulatory and Compliance Coordinator for Stanton Farms. Address is 9370 Road 234. We're here to in support of the addendum, obviously. We've solved the odor issue and have received letter testimonies from the community, and that's on record with the water board. We have not received any odor complaints in the past 9 months. We've solved the problem since January. We are not seeking to increase our wastewater capacity. We're going to stick with our existing WDR. It's going to be monitored by the water board. In fact, our new pit system, which we're reviewing now, will use less water than our existing pit system. So it benefits all parties. It benefits the water board, it benefits the air district, and it benefits the county. Because if we run this new system, we'll use less water because we have the best technology available at this system. We increased our system by 1,000% from 2019 and doubled our land application areas to prevent and eliminate any odors. And we have a case study that's proven to work. We have a sister plant called Brooklyn that's located about 7 miles west of Terabella. We have an existing 350 acre-foot pond, same design, same capacity, and we have not experienced any odors at that location. And the reason why is because we added 100 acre-feet of fresh water, then we added about 90 acre-feet of wastewater, and that seed prevented any odors to occur. So this year we're doing the exact same thing that was proven to work at our Brooklyn plant, and like I said, we've increased our filtration by 1,000%. So that's going to eliminate all the organic material going into freshwater and prevent that from decaying and creating any odors. We were pleased to work with the water board and happily agreed to execute the stipulation cease and desist order and comply with the required actions with SIN. We have no problem with that requirement. We have complied with every request made by every agency, and to this day, we have not had any odor issues. So it's been since January that we have resolved the problem. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Any additional public comments? Okay, I will close the public comment period and bring it back to the board. Mr. Bach, do you have anything to add?
Chairman, Supervisors, CAO, Council, I'm Aaron Bach, Assistant Director with the Resource Management Agency, and I did want to put into the record the county's response to the CRLA letter, very similar to what Mr. Kinsey had produced. I'd like to first of all, start by pointing your attention to the letter from the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board in the back. Basically stating there is no increase in discharged wastewater. They've submitted plans in compliance. So I'm a little surprised that CRLA was not aware of this. And the complete order for water discharge is submitted to the Central Valley staff, and the applicable time period has elapsed and requirements have been met under the water code. So basically, they're very much trying to get into compliance, and the catch-22 of all this is they need this environmental document to move forward with the Regional Water Quality Control Board and with the Air District to both on the upstart remove some of the water, and on the end of it discharge more water, so they're not creating the odor problem. So it was requested by Seton, so they could get their authority to construct permit from the Air District, that we produce this environmental document. The mechanism we used was under CEQA section 15164B. For technical changes or additions are necessary, or none of the conditions described in section 15162. In other words, there has not been a substantial alteration to the original ISM&D or any impacts from this project. They were all in line with our community plan. They are all by right. The permits they're talking about are generally by right. When they are ministerial, wouldn't even require an exemption. And there's nothing about discharge of waters in our zoning code, so there's no discretionary matter that needed to be approved necessarily by the board. All that needs to be certified here is that an addendum to the ISM&D is satisfactory in this situation. Staff found that to be true. Tearing off the existing ISM&D, we did go through all the resources in the evaluation. We could not find anything that's any more impact than currently exists in Terabella. So it's not, the baseline is the same. And as far as VMT, as we discussed last week, generally goods movement is exempt from VMT analysis, but more than that, this wouldn't exceed any of the thresholds we had already created in our ISM&D for the community plan. So again, this is all ministerial. Our zoning code doesn't even talk about discharge of waters. We're just trying to help them out by doing an addendum to the ISM&D so they can go forward to get their authority to construct permits and the catch-22 of all this, discharge water to reduce odor. So nothing new here.
Okay, thank you for your comments. I know this is set for a closed session, and council would like us to adjourn at this time.
Yes, this item is set as item B in closed session, and I do not expect an announcement out.
Okay, we will adjourn to closed session and return briefly. The board is now back in session. I will look over to Supervisor Valero, who had a request to speak.
Yes, all right. Well, first of all, I do want to thank, or the comments that were shared by the community today are duly noted, received, and appreciated. Although I may move forward on this matter, I've received numerous community concerns as well. My hope is that Seton will be a good neighbor and work in partnership with its residents, local leaders, and others who strive to make this area a great place for all. Let's not stretch the goalpost any further. And I hope that our resource management agency, as I look to them in the audience today, will make this connection conceivable. So thank you for sharing these concerns and bringing them to light.
Are there any additional comments from board members? Supervisor Crocker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think there were a few things that weren't brought up or maybe just have been alluded to, but from my experience, Seton Pistachios has done a phenomenal job with workforce development and providing a lot of jobs. They've stated that, but they're also working at trying to train people in the area of robotics and trying to increase the capacity, local capacity of Tulare County. They've also done significant projects, including creating a park in Terabella, something that unfortunately, you know, as a county, I would love to be able to do more parks, but the reality is that we still have a lot of maintenance that we need to do on the existing parks, let alone creating new ones. So they've really stepped up and helped with community efforts, and there's many other things that they do on a regular basis for the Terabella community. I think that they've really been good neighbors on a whole. And it was mentioned, I believe, earlier as well, but we are a right-to-farm county, and so as far as one of the complaints, I recognize that there are some inconveniences from time to time with neighbors, but overall, we support farmers, we support what they're doing, and if there is a little bit of an inconvenience, and I think that that's necessary in order to support our businesses and our farms.
All right, Supervisor Shuckling?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. I'd like to echo what Supervisor Crocker said, and I also want to also add that it appears that Seton has been willing to and has mitigated some of the issues such as odor and whatnot. And I hope that, you know, you will continue to listen to the community and try to mitigate those concerns whenever possible.
All right, Supervisor Townsend?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and chime in too, because I've seen some things that have taken place over the last few years at Seton with all the development. One of the things that wasn't mentioned as a dust mitigation measure, that they poured acres of concrete out there for truck lanes around that facility and the packing facility right behind it. As well as developing or hiring, and not just hiring, and not only entry-level jobs, but also research and development type jobs and management jobs in the area. And then on some of the specifics that were noted today, there's been mitigation measures that's been ongoing to the point where it's been signed off. And so some of the things that are being raised today on concerns are things that are old, that have already been taken care of, sort of old news. So I'm in hopes that we will support this project.
Okay. A couple comments that I want to make. I just want to thank Seton Pistachio. I know this is actually a different item than the trees being planted. We're talking about two separate things here, and I know that one of the inconveniences that farming can cause for its non-agricultural neighbors is sometimes dust. But the efforts that are undertaken to control dust with any operation that can be controlled, I know that you do put that forward, like Supervisor Townsend had mentioned, with concrete being planted and other efforts. But I just think it's always great to see companies that are located immediately adjacent to or in unincorporated communities make the significant investments that they have within the community, whether it's workforce development as highlighted, which obviously benefits the company, but it benefits the employees as well, to community investments and development through parks and various programs, scholarship programs, those types of things that Seton has done within the community of Terabella. Terabella and Tulare County as a whole have benefited. I know when there are concerns brought up, Seton does come to the table with solutions, which is in fact what this environmental document sets to pave the road for, to make the modifications as required by the Water Board. So I think that Seton has really been a pretty good neighbor, and when issues do come up, they do respond. They don't just move forward regardless of what the community's opinion is. So I don't think that they will last long in the community of Terabella if they don't adhere to or listen to community guidance and feedback. And so I think they've done a great job up till now, and I'm confident they will do so as they move forward. So I thank Sutton for their efforts and bring it to the board for action. Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Townsend, a second by Supervisor Crocker. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 unanimous. Thank you for that. We will now conclude our consent calendar consideration and move on to the untimed portion of our meeting today. Take up item 31, which is a request from the County Administrative Office to accept a report from the Workforce Investment Board regarding the COVID-19 Business Assistance Program, including financial applicant pool data.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jason Britt, County Administrator, and I will promptly turn it over to Mr. Peck, who is the Director of our Workforce Investment Board, who is administering these grants for a comprehensive update today.
Good morning, Chair, Supervisor, CEO, Council. Adam Peck, Executive Director, Workforce Investment Board of Tulare County. Do I escape out of this and then? I just wanted to provide a brief update and some direction for going forward with the Small Business COVID Relief Fund project. As of Sunday evening, do I do something else on here? It's showing on mine. There we go. Through the application deadline of midnight Sunday, August 16th, we received 1,294 applications. Great number, not the 1,500, but it's actually, there's some caveats with that. That is that 372 applications of those were either duplicates. That means if they submitted and it was incomplete, when we look through it, we reach back out to them, and because we make it so simple, they just submit a new application. And so some of those are duplicates. Some just weren't eligible because we did receive, if they weren't, for a variety of reasons, weren't a business in Tulare County, that it's one of the more common ones. Or they just didn't respond to further questions about what they were spending the money on, then those were determined to be disqualified. So that leaves us with 922 completed applications. And here's the breakdown by district. Blank, that's been cleaned up since this morning for some of the new applications, because we have not, some of those came in Sunday night. The fact that we made it so simple to apply bought us some work on the back end, as I explained last time, because we made it, and I think it was the right decision still, but it means we had a lot of applications where we have to go back to people and say, now, okay, now here's what you can spend it on, and do you realize this document needs to have this? And so of the 922, there are a number of those that we are still processing to determine, are those still eligible? I just got a number before I walked up here, and of those 922, about 622 of those have been deemed complete that we've gone through, made sure that everything is complete. So you end up with this 1293, and it starts to whittle down a bit. Now, I would hope that of those that we've received, that we're somewhere probably, if I had to guess, in the 750 range of eligible applications. A lot of it is the going back that you did not give us a completed W-9, or you need to revise what you say you're going to spend it on, those type of things. And folks have been responsive to that. You can see the district breakdown. It's a similar breakdown to what we saw last week, a little bit more outside of District 3, which is the largest by far right now. To give you an idea by community, what that looks like, most communities that are squarely within the districts, Visalia gets spread among those. These are just, I didn't list every one of them. I listed those that had more than 5 completed applications in, but you see by far Visalia, because even in District 1 and District 4, there are more Visalia than any other part of them. And you see Tulare and Porterville, Dinuba, and then Exeter has really had an outsized response, I would say, as a community overall. And then the rest you see there. So applications have continued strong all the way through the end of the deadline. We saw an early big numbers, and then it dwindled a little bit, but all last week was a pretty strong response. And so some things, let me see if before I get there, we're working with the chambers for better strategies. How can we get to the folks we haven't reached out to yet? And we're going through in communities throughout the area that using the commercial real estate folks. They know who's been paying rent and who hasn't, and so who might need help. Through the utility companies, same for commercial delinquent folks who might need help and haven't gotten it through others. And we are getting together a good database of small businesses that we're going to use the Alert TC if we then get the request to extend the application deadline to Monday at 5 p.m. And then which isn't even part of the kind of previous direction. You guys didn't get into the details of when exactly the deadline was, but where the guidelines that were approved by the board were originally to have expenditures needed to be done by September 30th. And if we look to extend the deadline, we want to be able to give the businesses more time to spend the money associated with. And so working with Jason and his staff came up with a recommendation to extend that to October 31st, get an extra week of applications coming in, and then come back to the board from there and look at where we stand. We'll continue to market it throughout the county with a focus on those underrepresented areas. As part of doing the business analysis, we'll also do the kind of the business penetration, what percent of businesses in each of these communities relative to the size versus the applications that come in. I want to again commend both the staff that we've had working on it. It's really been, it's a great opportunity. The folks, again, I would say, as I said last week, the businesses, the individuals that have applied, they're who I think this board had hoped would. They're the people that don't want to deal with this stuff, that are afraid of it, or are frustrated by it, and our folks that we've had working on it have had great experiences, feeling like they're actually making a difference in the lives of those that are applying for that. And so we are ready if approved. And then I would also say, from property tax to auditor's office, that everything's happening at once so that we don't have a lot of work at the end. They're creating vendors out of these folks and stuff so that we can quickly cut checks to businesses as approved. One other caveat, if we do get approval to do an extension on this, we do think it's important that if we got to a point where we had to initiate a lottery for anything, that those who met the original deadline would not be subject to that, that we would move forward with those complete applications to the funding phase of those. And if we did get in a position where there needed to be a lottery used for any of the districts, that would be amongst those who applied in the extended deadline. So we would be, if they move today, we'd be prepared to push out information that it has been extended and get the word out there. So subject to your questions.
Couple questions that I have, Adam. You started to say it and you stopped just short of it. When do you anticipate the checks being cut, just as a refresher for those businesses who may be listening who have applied for this program and may have been qualified? What is the deadline, or when do you anticipate checks being issued to those businesses?
We still want to stick to what our internal plan was, is the week of September 1st to have a check run for that, and that we don't want, and that was important to us too, that we don't hold up, that no extension holds up folks, the process that we explained to folks when they applied.
Okay, and then second question that I had is related to businesses maybe not obtaining relief. So this is one aspect of relief, and so I think that, you know, when we see the breakdown of by district applications, that doesn't necessarily mean that businesses in the districts that have lower numbers of applicants don't necessarily have businesses who have been assisted through this COVID pandemic, maybe by another source. So that's a great depiction of the Tulare County Small Business Relief Fund, but you know, it doesn't include the businesses that have been helped through EIDL or PPP or some other program. So I want to make sure that the portrayal to the general public is that we are making sure that businesses have resources or assistance to make it through this pandemic, and this is just one piece of that relief opportunity that may be out there for them.
That is certainly accurate, that this is filling in the gaps that have been, there's been substantial federal assistance, but it's in broad strokes that missed out on some folks, and this is filling in the gaps on those, along with some of the individual cities did use some CDBG funding associated with CARES Act. And there have been other targeted, even within the county, that some municipalities have taken.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Supervisor Valero?
I don't know if you've touched on this already, but will you be able to decipher in Visalia which districts those are? Because there may be an opportunity where, say, some happen to be in District 4 North, as well as those that may happen to be in District 1 East. And so then that may pave the way for all those who applied in Visalia Core may be able to receive those funds. And so that's why I'm just trying to see whether or not that.
So this gives us a district breakdown. And I did the district and the city, and then I have for each district inside the city.
So you've already done that then?
Yeah, we're keeping, in the end, the direction is by district. I just want to give some insight into that, and I don't want to overwhelm with too much data, but for each district I have the city breakdown within that district. Most important, obviously, in Visalia, where it is split. I don't even have that in my printed, but that is something that we definitely can parse out and do.
Okay, yep, thank you.
Remember the next slide, right? This says 365, but total Visalia is 485.
Right.
Yep.
120 are now between
Dispersed,
1 and 4.
Yeah, we have the exact data, and especially for the districts that take portions of Visalia, you can kind of see the breakdown of that. You know, I keep an eye on both job posting analytics and how that's spread throughout the county, and then actual business data. And this, I'm sorry, I'll go by just by city. This is substantially in line, which I would say it's the Exeter one and Lindsay that are a little outsized, actually, larger than they otherwise would be. When I look at general business data associated with business activity in the county. But the fact that that Visalia represents 60% of both job postings and jobs overall in the county. But we will continue to focus because it's not just the concentration of jobs. Folks feel far away from everything in the communities that are more remote, and so I think it takes more effort, and we're using the Hispanic Chamber to do kind of more hands-on, physically going into people's businesses who aren't being reached by social media and all the great messages. It takes that kind of hand-to-hand effort, and we've seen that in all the great work that HHSA is doing too with folks. You have to be in those communities to reach them.
Thank you.
Supervisor Townsend?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again, Adam, for all your hard work on this. I know you're working around the clock on it. I wanted to, actually, and this is just for everybody, I wanted to suggest, as we're going to be considering extending, and I'm going to be in favor of that, but I would like to suggest that we also consider going ahead and funding those that are over 300 per district because of what Adam was just stating, that the business distribution is obviously heavily Visalia. So if at the end of the application deadline, if we still have enough of these grants, I think we should go ahead and allow a distribution above the 300 that we originally directed, just because that's where the businesses are. They're asking for it. They needed it. They're in Tulare County. What benefits one business in Tulare County benefits all of Tulare County. Yeah. Just my suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's really no need for a law. I mean, if there were 1,700 applications,
Exactly.
then yeah, the lottery. But if we're not even hitting our 1,500, then whoever's eligible, no matter where, should agree with that.
And I'm not even sure. I'd have to look at CAO to see if I think the language in the guidance allows for that as it is. I don't know if there'd need to be any formal action.
Thanks, Adam. I think the sort of the goal was to try to keep it distributed equally amongst the district supervisor districts. However, knowing that probably we'd have a little bit of a higher applicant pool in Visalia, so we appreciate that flexibility, but it was really the goal. But seeing how the applicant pools come in, we appreciate the board supporting that, but I think that was initially just a sort of a goal to get to, so that we didn't have a disproportionate, the big fear is always like, District 3 gets sort of everything and the others don't, but seeing how the applications come in, I think, I'll be interested in Adam's opinion, but I think we probably will get to sort of being able to fund everyone who applies, unless we get a huge push this week.
No, I would agree. I think we'll continue to push hard for the next week, and I think we'll continue to get strong applications. But I don't think we will hit that full number such that we will have to come back to the board and concern of turning anyone away. But that's still in some ways, our goal. I mean, of course, is because we want to maximize what that goes, and we want to then have a discussion. There's some. I've had some preliminary discussions with CAO about looking at some other areas, and some folks who still won't fill out an application, but if we come to a point where there's additional resources that the board then decide to continue to put towards businesses, that like some direct PPE kinds of things, like maybe a business that would never apply, but if you knocked on their door and said, hey, ask them a few questions and give them some package of stuff, that's almost a more community safety than it is fiscal viability, but it's somewhere in between. But that's can be discussed as the board considers what to do with anything that doesn't get expended through this project.
All right, Supervisor Crocker.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work. I'm happy to see that District 1 is boxing a little above its weight. So that's good to see that. And I know there's a lot of community groups that are trying to advertise and get that message out. And I like the idea of extending the application. I love the idea of making sure that there's no lottery for businesses that already met the deadline. What, if we expanded another week, what's the likelihood that, that we're going, what additional outreach could we do to try and get those last? I mean, because I know there, on the one hand, I've spoken with individual business owners that, you know, as late as over the weekend that said, I had no idea about this, and yet I'm seeing a lot of the organizations that are, I mean, they're promoting it very heavily. So I know that there's definitely efforts, but, you know, there's hard to reach people, and they're hard to reach. That's why they're called hard to reach.
Right. Yeah, and that is why we're, like you said, from the commercial real estate to trying some new approaches, and some of the cities and chambers have been great, because we'll come up with an idea from one and then share it with the others. And it's been difficult to come up with a good database of small businesses for contact info to use Alert TC. And it was actually in the midst of the meeting, I thought of another idea, and through a database we use that I did not realize we were going to be able to find it. So I have some promising ways of getting out. And like I said, having the Hispanic Chamber focus in the areas that don't have a chamber, that don't have a city, that don't have anyone that's out there promoting it, and then making sure that all to the degree we're promoting social media posts, which we're getting to the part of folks who aren't responding to social media, but that we're doing it in the outlying areas. And we're able to look at some metrics associated with our social media posts, and we are getting to a much higher percentage of folks that Spanish is their primary language. We can see some demographic stuff, and to the outlying areas. So some of that has been effective when we concentrate all of our boosting of those posts in those areas that haven't otherwise been reached. So those are the type of things we're doing. We have another meeting with our collaborative of those folks tomorrow morning to extend that effort.
And I guess I just bring that up because of the reality that even extending it and providing more outreach, we still may not get to the goal of 1,500 businesses, which I know in past board meetings we've talked about, you know, some changes that we might do to the program, as far as I've suggested increasing the dollar amounts, and maybe that's just rather than setting a specific dollar amount, just, you know, leaving that to discretion. If there's leftover money and we reach August 24th, if there's extra, you know, money in the pot, that we increase everybody's from $5,000, and then maybe it's $5,200 or whatever that is after you spread it all out to eligibility, or maybe it's higher. So that, and as well as it's also been brought up to increase the amount of employees that a business can have in order to qualify. And I know from, I'm not sure what the interest would be based on we still have the requirement that you didn't receive PPP, and that's, it seems like the bigger the business, and they're going to probably have sought that out and received that. But I do know that there has been a lot of questions from sole proprietors that they think they're not eligible for this because they don't have any employees. And so that question gets them a little bit confused, because they say, well, if you have 20 employees or less, well, I don't have any employees. It's like, well, no, but that you qualify. So at the very least, I would like, if it's possible, to clarify that, or just make a statement on that, on the application, to say that they do qualify, or that is, because that has been brought up quite a bit, where I've said, no, that's who we want to get out to, that you're the one we're really targeting.
Yeah, and we have clarified that on the app now to for those who thought 0 employees might not fit in 20 or fewer. We've tried to clarify that in a couple of places, both in the FAQ and in the application itself.
Okay, Supervisor Valero.
So I just wanted to go back to one of the comments that you made, Supervisor Crocker, in terms of what do we do with the excess of funds that we may have. But it doesn't limit us to then take that money and put it into another pot, correct? In terms of going back and maybe additional rental mortgage, so that way, because I think what we've done our part in terms of reaching out and doing what we can. But I think if we do have an excess, I think it can also be distributed elsewhere.
And I have a question for our CAO. In terms of broadening what we've already allocated, are there specific restrictions that we must abide by in order to not subject ourselves to any additional sanctions or having to return the money back that we need to be cautious of as this conversation evolves?
So, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a couple things is, the sort of the fact that they've received PPP or some other federal funding, that's pretty inflexible. I think between Adam and I and the auditor, we've kind of come to that determination. The other piece, and maybe Adam will speak to this as well, but I think changing the rules during the middle of the sort of this might create some confusion, or may have other people may feel like, well, if there was more money at stake, I might have been more motivated to apply. And we're also concerned with the types of businesses that we are seeing apply, the very small businesses, that if we were to increase the dollar amount, there is some concern that they may not be able to spend the money by September 30th. I know that sounds odd, but that is some of the concern that we have. And if they didn't spend the money by the October 30th, if the board were to extend that deadline here today, that could put us in a situation of asking them for money back to prevent an audit exception. So I don't know, Adam, if you have some additional thoughts on that, but that was just sort of some of the considerations we've tossed around about changing the dollar amount of the program.
Early on, we had advised going forward with a single dollar amount just for simplicity of, these are so many things we're getting processed. They're running in single GACS runs, and we're working with IT and auditor's office on how to put that together. And there are a good chunk of the applicants, because they are sole proprietors and they may not, and there are limits to what these expenses can be, that we have to work with them to come up with the $5,000 of expenses, even though, not that they haven't been out more money, but this doesn't take care of life. It isn't a income replacement. It's not allowed. It's for rent and utilities and other COVID-related costs. And even though folks have had financial hardships, they may still struggle to come up with the 5,000. So we've looked at it in considering this, and I think it would be very difficult to still move quickly to get folks funded and checks run so they could spend it, with changing the dollar amount and going back to each of them to have them change their expenditure plan, or to just cut more money and have them return what I can feel Cass's eyes like from behind me of like having to return money and
Don't look.
Of that prospect of like us being done, but we give you more money and hey, whatever you don't spend, turn it back. That creates all kinds of problems in the board understanding what resources it has available as it makes these decisions. And there, I appreciate this isn't the only moving part of this fund. So.
Okay, I know, yeah, do you
Mr. Chairman, sorry. I just wanted to address Supervisor Valero's question earlier was, yes, in theory, if the whole 7.5 isn't spent, it would go to other expenditure plan, potential expenditures in the plan that was presented to the board. However, as Adam mentioned, we've also talked about, depending on where we end up, and if we have any significant money, sort of what would be the viability of putting together sort of care packages for some of our smaller businesses out in the unincorporated areas with like PPE or, just sort of some of those types of things that just go knock on their door and say, here, we're delivering it and have a nice day. Yeah, we know you could use this. So there are other things we are brainstorming to kind of how we can still use the 7.5 million towards small businesses that the board has requested that we do. So I just wanted to make sure I addressed your question with that.
Truckling?
Yeah, Adam, I know it's getting down to the wire. Did we use like any PSAs, like radio or anything like that, or?
We did not have any PSAs on this. We didn't do any paid media. I'm sorry, we did press. We did especially Univision and others beyond both the initial press release done by the county and then follow up did Paper Trail podcast, which that's a narrower audience of those. But I think we could do another push in media that gets out into the rural areas. So we'll talk about because we have done PSAs in that media before, and see if we can get something turned around in time to get them to act. That's good.
Okay, and then for Mr. Britt, do we have an amount yet that we've set aside for rental and utilities? Or that we've come up with?
Yes, 2 million.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Townsend?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question on that last conversation about being able to spend it by September or October, or coming up with the receipts. I was thinking when we first looked at this, there was going to be an attestation included that the business was in fact hurt by the involuntary closure, or the mandatory closure of their business, which would by definition be a loss of revenue. And so it seems like if a business is shut down, let's see, we're in the 5 months now, essentially. So it seems like if they were to look back and if they were shut down just for a couple of months out of that, or all of those, depending on the business, that would be by definition that they were hurt by the closure, and they could attest that they had lost at least that $5,000. Is that not still a part of the process?
The attestation is, and the any financial harm they've had essentially is what we have them attest to.
Okay, so a loss of revenue is...
That makes them allowable for the receipt, but there's still a discrete categories of what you can expend the money on. It doesn't become, since you have a loss, that this money is just, trust me, I wish it could be like that, because I as clean as we can, just look, you've had an impact and we're granting the 5,000, but the structure of the funding is both in the agreement that the WIB has with the county, and which I think comes from the CARES Act funding, required these discrete expense categories.
To make that a little more specific, of the statement or question is, so you have someone, I mean, they have to shut down, but let's say there's still rent that was paid during that time, so they had zero revenue or a limited revenue, but they still paid rent and a certain amount of utilities, at least a baseline. All that still qualifies, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and going back to March. And so if you have those, and that has been largely what folks, to keep it simple for folks, but there are a lot of non-traditional businesses within it that may not have those rent expenses. They may have different kinds of expenses, but that example, absolutely, and it's the most common. Look at rent and utilities, going back the last several months that you've been impacted, and those are your allowable expenses.
So again, just for simplicity, let's say they've been closed for 4 months out of the whole time, and let's say that their rent plus utilities was $1,000 a month, so they can produce $4,000 worth of receipts, but they've got zero revenue. Are they still okay? Can they still qualify?
Yes.
Yes. I think, Supervisor Townsend, what we're finding, and Mr. Peck can help me here, is that a lot of our applicants are sort of the independent contractors.
Right.
And they may have been a beautician within a larger sort of salon, and maybe their rent was only $300 a month. Right. So they have $1,200 in expenses, but that person has to show us that they can spend $5,000.
So that's my question, is why do they have to show that they can spend it? Can't they show that they've lost over $5,000 and
If they can demonstrate loss in business expenses, not income replacement.
not revenue? I mean, if you're closed down involuntarily and you have zero coming in, but you can only prove 1,500, 2,000, 4,000, 4,500 going out, why wouldn't they qualify for this $5,000 grant if they've been closed by the government for 4 or 5 months?
They will qualify. What we're simply saying is that in some of the applications, what we're saying is we're reticent to increase the dollar amount from 5,000 to something other that, as suggested by Supervisor Crocker, because in a lot of our cases, the folks that we are working with, even though they're paying 4 or 5 months of rent, utilities, PPE, plexiglass, whatever, they're still not being able to demonstrate that they've had more than $5,000 in expenses because they're small, very small businesses.
I know, but we're neglecting the loss of income based on being shut down by the government, which I thought is what this was trying to fill a gap. Because these businesses or independent contractors could not have received any other help from the federal government. That was in the CARES Act. So I was thinking this was a stopgap for those poor guys that got shut down and couldn't go back to work. And now we're saying, well, you got to prove that you can spend or show us receipts that you can spend $5,000 when really the big loss was revenue more than expenses in PPE or plexiglass because they've been shut down.
Supervisor, I think that one thing that we have to remember, and that's what the question was that I asked Jason a little bit earlier, we have to be careful because this is still a CARES Act allocation. Right. Even though we have local discretion in how that money is spent, we still have to be subject to federal auditing.
Well, that's my question. I thought that's what the CARES Act was. I thought that's what this allocation was for.
Well, I think we'll go back and double check some of the rules, but essentially, if we're paying their rent and utilities and their business expenses, I mean, in some ways, that is sort of still helping them. It's the CARES Act has been very specific in what can be replaced as revenue. So, for example, like for the county, we can't just simply use it as a revenue replacement, but we can offset other costs that will then sort of free up, money to use for other purposes. So, so we'll go back and double check those FAQs. But I think the point that we're trying to make here is that the businesses that we're getting to apply are the businesses we wanted to apply. Right. I just think that what we're not seeing is that a lot of our very, very small businesses had more than $5,000 in sort of business expenses. So we can get to the 5,000. I'm not sure with the barbers and some of those that we'll get to 6 or 7 or 8 or 10. But that's where the smaller businesses, just didn't have as much expenses as we kind of maybe thought.
Okay, well, I know I would really appreciate that follow-up because, again, my understanding is that's exactly who we were trying to help. We expanded it out. We started with businesses under 10 and independent contractors and 501c3s. We expanded it out to 20 because that captures 75-80% of the businesses in the county, but the initial target was those small ones, and they may very well have a hard time finding receipts for $5,000, but it will be very easy to demonstrate that they've lost $5,000 to their business.
Go ahead. You had a
Sorry,
question.
it's on this. Weren't a lot of folks who are independent contractors or self-employed who typically would not receive unemployment insurance benefits receive unemployment insurance benefits and the expanded unemployment insurance?
Yeah, the pandemic unemployment assistance, a fair number of folks, the applications, there have been high numbers here in Tulare County of applications for that. We don't get into, it was actually an early change we made in the application. The first day was we backed off of like trying to put in calculators on that, and we just said, let us know, considering everything, have you faced a negative financial impact? And so, yeah, but a lot of folks here, they've received pandemic unemployment assistance. It's helped in some ways for their home, expenses, but it hasn't helped for some of their business-related expenses.
Because I mean, and obviously I'm very supportive of this, but in this conversation, there are some people who might have even brought home more money than they were before, and before they were able to make those, rental payments or whatever payments. And now with more money, they should have been able to also.
Yeah, we see every variation. You have a lot of people who the pandemic unemployment assistance helped them pay the rent, but it didn't help them pay their nail salon rent. And so this is where this fills in. And so,
right.
And I don't believe that this really is the question, the conversation we're having is really the issue unless the dollar amount threshold is changed and increased above $5,000, correct?
Right. We've been able to work with most businesses, and we've been, to the degree that we can be flexible, that we meet the what the county put in our agreement. We work with folks who immediately think, I may not have those expenses. We work with them to try to get them up to that 5,000 based upon trying to understand their businesses and what the expenses are related to their businesses.
Thank you. Supervisor Crocker?
Thank you. In light of what was stated regarding the care packages, or whatever we're going to call them, my point in only bringing up the additional amount is that, I think we can all state that we know that $5,000 really for most businesses is not enough, and so how can we do more? And that's really the intent. And so if we're doing some type of care packs, because I also recognize that there is a need to get the money out quickly, because they need the funds now. And so I don't want to delay anything as far as that goes. And I recognize that there is an administrative burden. And so I don't want it to make it any more difficult on staff as we're continuing to do that. So, I guess, and so if we think that there's additional issues and risks by changing it, recognizing that there's opportunity to still do some additional outreach by, and just extending that, then I think that's a fair way to go about it. I will say I think that EDD has a huge backlog on unemployment claims. So for people that are looking for that, even if they may be eligible for that, there's a high likelihood that they may not be receiving those benefits, even though they applied for them months ago. So I think that's just a good point to recognize.
Okay, Supervisor Shuckling?
Oh, no, I already spoke. I cut in front of Crocker.
Okay. Any additional comments? Any public comments? Okay, this will be, are we going to be taking a specific action to extend the deadline? That's an action item then, so we will entertain a motion.
I would move that we accept the report and that we extend the deadline for applications through Monday, August 24th. Oh, pardon? And revise the deadline for eligible expenditures to August 31st for those who are...
to October 31st.
Yeah, Halloween, October 31st, 2020.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Shuckling and a second by Supervisor Valero. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 unanimous. Thank you for that presentation, Adam. Next, we'll move on to item 32, which is a request from the Health and Human Services Agency to approve the new classification of contract tracer and extra help contract tracer.
That was close, contact tracer. It's a little bit of a word twist, I guess, tongue twist. Good morning, I am Karen Elliott, and I guess it still is morning, about 10 minutes left. Thank you, Chairman, Supervisors, CAO, and County Council. I am here to request a few things. We are creating a contact tracer classification. This has become a very popular type of activity and position since COVID-19 hit. And we have been very successful in using current staff to do contact tracing. We have also enlisted other departments, some disaster service workers, also through the WIB and CSET, we've been able to use some of the funding they have to bring people on. And we also are looking at using Proteus to contract. But even with all of that, with the state has basically stated that we need at least 72 FTEs based on our population of contact tracers at any time to continue this advancement to get to the people who have had contact with known people with the virus. So we really felt like it was important for us to create this position. We had been talking about it for months, but had never really brought it before the board to do it. The thought is to create and put 3 positions, our FTEs, that we are looking at to place as extra help. We do have CARES Act funding through the end of December that will assist in funding these positions. And there is the ELC Enhanced Detection Fund that goes through November 2022. In Strategy 5, there's $3.1 million that does address a lot of activities, and part of it is the contact tracing. So we do feel very confident in the ability to fund, at least in the extra help capacity, through as long as we need them. We also are looking at some communicable disease investigators. We actually had a classification, but we're basically updating and revising it. We're dusting it off. We have 1 active one, but we are creating 2 more. A communicable disease investigator can also be a contact tracer. It's just they are a little more into where they actually contact the individual who has the infection. So whereas the contact tracers go and talk with all the contacts of the individual with the virus, the communicable disease investigator just kind of has that interview skills, that sort of more knowledge education to kind of talk to that person through who has a communicable disease. Because this goes beyond COVID-19, we need it for our other communicable disease, such as our sexually transmitted diseases, which Tulare County, unfortunately, in the Central Valley has a rate above that of the state. So we took this opportunity to also, we can bring these in, they can supervise over the contact tracers, which is a benefit. Plus, we will have them ongoing so that when we do get back and we need to get back to our normal duties, we have these available. And we do have grant funding that prior to COVID, we were getting additional allocations through several sources from the state that was allowing us to fund these types of positions. So I am here today to request the approval of these positions plus the FTEs associated with it. And if you have any questions.
Okay, any questions from board members? Supervisor Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We were just talking about the additional funding that was coming down from the state. Is that where these funds will come from for the contact tracers?
It's going to be a combination of the CARES Act that we have that again goes through the end of December. And we do have in our allocation, we have about $700,000 that we have put between the contracts that we have again with Proteus that we have worked with, plus our own internal staff that can charge to it and charge against these. And then that the ELC, which in its Enhancing Detection Fund is the name of the funding that came through. It's $8.5 million. There's 6 strategies attached to it, and strategy 5 of it is having to do with working with those impacted populations, honing in on, such as skilled nursing facility, meat packing plants, farm workers. It's to do the surveillance and give them the case management through that funding. And there's $3.1 million that's been attached to that through November 2022. And we do plan to, again, some of the contracts that we have, such through Proteus, partial of it will be through the CARES Act but we know that they might still be in use after that. And so we have partial of the ELC money that we would be attaching to it, but it would help fund these staff people that we're adding.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions or comments from board members, members of the public? If not, I will entertain a motion. All right, we have a motion by Supervisor Valero, second by Supervisor Shucklian. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. We will now move on and take up item 33, which is a request from the Solid Waste Department to approve an agreement with Peña's Disposal retroactive from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2025 to concur with the commitment of 100% of refuse volume by Peña's Disposal to the Tulare County landfill system. Nice to see you, Bryce.
Nice to see you, Pete.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
Still healthy?
Yeah.
Still staying COVID-free?
Healthy and well.
Hopefully. Hopefully the rest of you are too. This is a very similar agreement that we've had in the past, and it's also very similar to the one you actually approved in consent. The real difference between this one and the one that was in consent is that we're asking for a, I guess I don't want to call it the word forgiveness, but what we did is, well, let me just go through the agreement. So waste disposal agreements are sort of a backbone of our organization. So waste disposal agreements count for probably 2/3 to 45 to 75% of our revenue. We have waste disposal agreements with the 3 large cities and with 2 of our larger haulers. That encompassing with our franchise agreements, which flow control material to our landfills, really generate almost, like I said, 75%, even greater of our gate fees. So there's sort of the backbone of how we keep our funding going. So Peña's Disposal was one of the first entities to enter into a waste disposal agreement with us 6 years ago, and was really the start of the process of sort of solidifying our organization funding-wise. So this new agreement, in fact, we were in closed session about this, it seems like a year ago now, and what we decided to do was, let me just start with Peña's again. So they do 60,000 tons internally inside the county, 22,000 tons externally. We do about 450,000 tons total, so you can see what percentage they have. Very significant percentage of tons that come to us and therefore revenue. The previous agreement was in 2014, which expired about a year ago. In the last year, we've been negotiating this new language with Mid-Valley and with Peña's Disposal. The new agreement is $28 a ton for 4 years, and then on the last year it goes to $34. That's what we had talked about a year ago in closed session, as you recall. The out-of-county rate stays the same at $21.50 for all 5 years. The total agreement is worth around $11 million to us in revenue. You can see the breakdown of in-county tons, around 6.7 million, and then the out-of-county tons around 2.3. A big piece of what we're requesting here is retroactive. So what we did is we continue to charge Peña's Disposal $34 a ton once their contract expired. And they did pay at the $28 rate, so they're building a balance. We were in negotiations with them in good faith, so we felt that was the right thing to do instead of charging them more. And so what we're asking for is the retroactive or the receivables of that amount, forgiveness of $583,000. They did continue to pay the $28 they had been under contract for 5 years, plus what they were paying out of county. So that's our request today. Our request today is to go ahead and approve the waste disposal agreement with Peña's Disposal for 5 more years at $28 a ton for 4 years. Then the 5th year it moves to $34, which would match up with all the other unincorporated haulers, and is actually the exact same agreement we just got approved for Mid-Valley. And then $21.50 for the out-of-county material. And that agreement is for 5 years, plus the reversal, I guess, of the $583,000 that's on their balance.
Okay. Bryce, quick question that I have for you. Would you just talk about, I know we just had the Mid-Valley agreement. How does a hauler get this type of an agreement with the county for committing their total in-county and then also out-of-county? I know in-county in the franchise area is required to come to the county landfill, but how about out-of-county waste? Are these agreements available to other haulers as well or not?
Right, so what we do is we took a look at where Mid-Valley and Peña's Disposal has agreements. They already have agreements in place to have a certain amount of volume. So for an example, Peña's Disposal, most easy example, is the city of Dinuba. So they have a contract with the city of Dinuba for that volume. So we want to make sure they bring that to us. In previous times, they were able to get better pricing and take that to other landfills 6 years ago. So we, to be competitive, lowered our price to them to attract that volume into our system. So it worked overall. So same thing with Mid-Valley. They have agreements with some of the other cities here in Tulare County. Pena's Disposal has some agreements in place for out-of-county material that we've approved to come in, which helps our overall rate structure here in Tulare County. By taking that volume in from out of county, it lowers the rates to everyone else.
Okay.
Or it keeps us from raising the rates, is what I should say.
Okay. Are there any additional questions from board members? Comments? Any public comment? Okay, we don't have any additional public comments, so I'll bring it back to the board for action. All right, we have a motion from Supervisor Valero, a second from Supervisor Crocker. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we will now move on and take up item 34. Don't go too far, Bryce. This is a presentation given by the Solid Waste Department regarding an overview of the department, and I like the cover page of this presentation taken right here in Tulare County, the only home to seagulls in Tulare County at our landfills.
Yes, we have a couple of seagulls. I think they're California gulls, probably. Might be the correct term. Okay, so department overview. So the Solid Waste Department, a few of you have been around me for a while now, so we have 45 employees total. We have 2 active landfills, and we have 1 landfill that we have mothballed. The 2 active ones are Visay and Teapot Dome. We have a mothballed one of Woodville that will be reopening back up in a couple of years. Our department is broken down into 3 groups: operations, environmental compliance, and administration. And we have 6 transfer stations, which we'll go into a little bit more. Let me just speak a little bit about those right now. So the 6 we have, one of them is funded through I think property taxes basically, or through a use charge. The other 5 are funded through gate fees. And those transfer stations run around 100,000 to 150,000 negative each year in their gate fees. So in reality, the rest of the department is offsetting those fees. The gate fees that they are paying at these transfer stations really provide for the person that's up there and the transportation of that material down to our landfills, but doesn't really pay for the disposal component at the landfill itself. So that's one thing about the transfer stations. We've been running that negative now for 6, 7 years, maybe longer, but it's something we have been able to handle financially, so it's continuing. Our revenues. So we run around $19 million in revenue. That's slowly been growing over time. The big portion of our revenue is commercial, which is 67%. Of that commercial portion, those waste disposal agreements we just got done talking about make up maybe 80% of that. So a big chunk of that is under contract to us already, not exposed to go somewhere else. The self-haul is the smaller ones. Mostly that's cash. People pay by cash that don't have an agreement with us to payment terms. That's 6% of our revenue, maybe $1 million, $1.2 million a year. Then we have some recycling, which is primarily green waste. We take a small amount of green waste in. There are 2 other vendors in the county that handle green waste as well, and they have most of the agreements, I guess. We handle most of the self-haul. We get a small portion from franchise, which is our agreements through the haulers. When they entered in those franchise agreements, they agreed to pay us a 5% franchise fee, and that 5% franchise fee was not passed on when we agreed to those, not passed on to the consumer. That came out of their profits. And then we have some interest. We actually get 9% of our money from interest, which is pretty outstanding, I think, still. That's because we get interest from our closure fund, which has like $30 million in it, plus this fund has about $30 million as well. So that combined gets our interest. Landfill volumes. You can see that primarily it's all refuse, very little amount of green waste and a little bit of C&D. Now, because of the new state regulations that we'll talk more about, starting in January 1st, 2022, there's a requirement to try and keep organic material out of landfills to reduce the amount of methane gas emissions, to try and reduce global warming. 1383 is a big bill that's coming out. One of the big differences about 1383, it's requiring us as jurisdictions to make sure this takes place and it requires us to actually exert penalties on people that don't comply. So that's a big change from any other regulation that's come down from Cal Recycle recently. We expect this 90% volume here to shrink because it's going to reduce that amount, which will reduce our gate fees, but probably be offset by increase in population. There's a lot of stuff out there in the state saying these amount of refuse tons are going to decrease by 30%. I doubt that, but we'll talk about that more as we go on. This is our 5-year projection on capital and expenses and how much cash we have in. So the green line you see up there really talks about how much cash we have in our bank right now in our operating fund. So right now we have just under $38 million. You can see that it decreases in 2021 down to about $28 million. That's because we're doing the Visalia Phase 4 expansion, which is a significant $8 or $10 million project that actually your board approved a couple months ago. You can see that the blue line is our revenue, which is a steady increase. So we've seen our revenue go up relatively steady every year, year after year, around 2 to 3% a year. We have not seen a decrease. Let me speak a little bit more about that. So we thought during COVID, we might see a significant decrease in revenue. We did not. Whatever amount of trash people were generating, they just kept generating it. Maybe they were generating at home instead of at the restaurant, but they kept generating it. In fact, year-over-year comparisons between July to July, we've seen an increase of about 10% in revenue. And that means 10% in volume too, because our gate rates have not gone up. So that translates right to how much people are producing of trash, about a 10% increase. So generally what that means to me is that our economy, at least from a building perspective and from a construction perspective, is probably still pretty healthy. So you can see that our cash drops down to about $28 million or so for a couple of years, and then we start to build it back up as we stop doing construction projects. One of the things we should talk about really briefly is cash-wise, the floor we probably want to be at in our agency or our department is probably between 20 and 25 million. We probably never want to get below 20 because then that gets us into a position where we don't have the money to spend on new equipment or new cells, at least in the short term. Once we get below 20, then whatever happens, we would need time to build that money back up. So we're in a nice, healthy place over the next 5 or 6 years.
Real quick, Bryce, when you first came to Tulare County, where was that fund?
So we were
in
at
2014, 2015.
$3 million of actual cash we could operate with, but $8 million compared to this. So we were at $8 million 6 or 7 years ago, and now we're around, as you can see, like 37 or so.
Thank you.
Right, and primarily that's because these waste disposal agreements once again, and we have built cells, we have purchased equipment. It's really about getting all that volume in. So 6, 7 years ago, the landfill was taking in about 190,000 tons of material, but relatively the same amount of cost structure of people and equipment. Now we're taking in about 450,000 tons of material. A lot more material. We're taking in everything that Tulare County generates. Before we were taking in about 50%. So current projects. So currently we have the Visalia Landfill Phase 4 expansion project going on, building a brand new cell, which should last us 4 or 5 years, maybe even longer. We just got done doing the waste disposal agreements for Mid-Valley and Peñas. So now we have waste disposal agreements for every one of our cities in Tulare County is basically under our agreement with us, and so is the unincorporated area. So we have all the flow from Tulare County. The only flow we wouldn't have would be, for an example, like school districts are not under agreements with any of the cities. They can do what they want. Those types of special districts, small amount. We're also working on the Woodville EIR and master plan. That's a transition from Teapot Dome closing down, we think maybe in about 3 years or so. So we're getting ready for Woodville to open back up. And then we're also working on a new project, which is, we've been working on this for a couple of years now, but we're starting to get into the more serious stages of it, is a composting permit for the city, for the Visalia landfill. We're seeing that our particular county does not have the capacity to handle the new organics regulation, the amount of space needed to compost or to handle all the organics. So we've decided to go out and start exploring what it would take to get a permit at the Visalia landfill to open up a composting facility. We just started that process of going through the permitting process, a conditional use permit process and a SUPA document. Whether we ever operate it ourselves or whether a third party operates it or whether we sell that to another entity, I think our goal right now is to make sure our county has capacity. what we've seen out of the private sector is that these things are really expensive to get going, and it's a really heavy lift to get up there. So we can afford the permitting process. The actual capital is just like building a new cell. $8–10 million of capital to get one of these things going. I would suggest we would never invest in that unless we had, once again, waste disposal agreements associated around green waste or organics, so we had the flow to make sure that would be profitable, or not profitable, but an entity that could sustain itself. Future projects, so we're going to do the Visalia Phase 4 right now, and then 5 years from now or so, you'll see another graphic that shows that we're going to do Visalia Phase 5. Once that Phase 5 is done, that's it. That's all the additional cell or horizontal expansions we're going to do at Visalia. Then we would just go up, and going up is like 15 years of going up. But I think in the meantime, what we'll start exploring, I have it down here as Phase 6, and some of my coworkers corrected me that that's really going to be Waste Management Unit number 3. So Waste Management Unit number 1 is closed out at Visalia. We did that closure a couple years ago. We're in Waste Management Unit number 2 right now, which still has 15, 20 years, 25 years of capacity. But I think we'll start looking at where Waste Management Unit number 3 might be. The thought process is once Visalia closed, that we would run one central landfill at Woodville. But I think it's good for us to take a look at that resource we have and not walk away from it until we really know what we can get out of it. So we're going to start sometime this year, probably more in earnest next year, of looking at what Waste Management Unit number 3 would look like. More than likely, it's going to be something where you have these two mountains that have been built, Waste Management 1 and 2, probably filling in the canyon in between, and some other additional capacity like that. Probably what it'll look like. So then we're going to look at Woodville Phase 2, which is the next sort of piece that we're looking at to get Woodville up and running again. That will sort of take care of when Teapot Dome closes. Teapot Dome closure is going to be a big project we're going to start taking on in about 3 years. One of the things about Teapot Dome I should let you know about is that we build up money for closure to fund these closure mechanisms, so we have the money in place by the time we get to closure, so we don't have to go out and raise rates to get it. The one part about Teapot Dome closure is dependent upon on-site soils. So if for some reason we didn't have enough on-site soil, we'd have to go buy soil, so that amount might go up. We've already started to accumulate money for that inevitable just in case that happens, which we think is like maybe another $3 or $4 million. So we're starting to set money aside for that. The last thing is we do have energy generation out at Visalia landfill. And we're looking at what we can do with the property at Teapot once it closes down. What can we do with that landfill? What can we do with the property that we have at Visalia that we can never put trash on, but we use for just soil excavation? Is there some other use we can use those for? Composting permits potentially, maybe solar, and maybe some methane generation. So we're taking a look at those as well. Capital improvement plans. So as you can see, we've started the Phase 4 expansion and the Teapot Dome potential redesign. Now, that's more about whether we are really done with Teapot Dome. So Teapot Dome has a certain amount of capacity that's been approved. And we would like to make sure that we don't have any little nooks and crannies we can't add on to get another 1 or 2 years out of it. So we're going to make sure that by asking our consultants to take one more look at it, to make sure we've captured everything we can out there before we walk away from that site. The Visalia Phase 4 expansion should end sometime in 2021. Hopefully you'll be able to see a video at the end of this that shows that. That's going on pretty well. We'll begin the expansion of Woodville in late 2022, so it's not that far away. That will take maybe about a year to do. The Teapot closure will happen around the same time in 2023, and then the Visalia Phase 5 expansion was sometime out in 2026. So if you go back to that previous slide we had where it showed the revenue projections and the cash, you can see it sort of tracks through that Phase 5 expansion at Visalia. Once we get through the Phase 5 expansion at Visalia, that's really the big hurdle for us capital-wise. So if you think about what we've been doing for the last 6 years, is we've been only expanding capital, expending money at one landfill. The other one we haven't spent any money on capital at, which is Teapot. For a brief period of time, we're going to spend money at 2 landfills on capital, which that's why you see that big depletion in cash from 38 million down to about 28. Because for a brief period of time, we'll be spending capital at 2 landfills to improve them. Once we hit 2026 and we finish the capital at Visalia, We'll only have one landfill then going forward for like the next 15 years we'll be spending capital at. Whereby Say's capital will be zero basically as far as cell construction, but we'll have 15 more years of life. So you can see this, the next 5 years or so is where we're going to be capital intensive. We get through that in good shape, then we're in pretty good shape from there on out. So the goal is to try and get between now and 2026 with the capital we have, with the money we're generating, with the rates being stable, and then after that we should be in pretty good shape. Of course, there's that impact of 1383 and the organics. So future issues. So SB 1383 is a very broad, impactful regulation. Some of you may remember when the state of California passed AB 939 back in around 1990, and that really started the multiple can, sorting your garbage at home sort of thing, to try and reduce the amount of trash from 50% down to like 75%, big reductions there. This is the same type of thing. They believe this is sort of going to change the industry dramatically. So that's one issue we're dealing with and one important thing we're working on. We believe we're putting aside good cash reserves for future capital. We've got a good plan in place for that. Teapot Dome closure, I think I already talked about sort of the issue around whether we have enough soil or not. But the other thing we're thinking about out there is how to prolong the commercial haulers or prolong the life of it as much as possible. And should we shut down to certain types of material or certain types of haulers ahead of time? Should we leave it, like for an example, should we only take the city of Porterville's trucks in there, or should we push them off to Woodville sooner and leave it open for the general public, or the opposite? Those are all policies that we're thinking through, and we'll come back to you for feedback as we get closer to that time. The last thing I've got down here is decrease in refuse disposal. So we think that 1383 will have an impact on the amount of refuse that we take in, and therefore our gate fees, and therefore our revenues. So when you think about it, most of us have a 3-cart system: black cart, gray or brown, the blue cart, and the green cart. We take the black, gray, or brown cart. That's what we take. We take a little bit of the green cart, but not much. So what's going to happen is, as residents and as commercial businesses, we're going to be required to make sure you don't put any organic material into your black, brown, or gray cart. And to make sure of that, we're going to go out and flip the lid up on your cart and check. And if you're not doing that, we're going to give you a little warning ticket that says, don't do that. Put it into the green cart. So we're going to move a significant amount of volume, maybe 20 to 30% out of that black and gray and green cart, black, gray, or brown cart into that green cart. We don't collect the green cart at the landfills. That's not what we have right now. So you could see that's going to have a reduction. So we're trying to take a look at what does that mean to us going forward in the future. SB 1383. So just real quickly, has different components to it. You can see that it provides organic collection for all residents and businesses. That will be required. We'll have to put an ordinance in place that requires them to have that service. It establishes an edible food recovery program. That's one of the areas that we're going to have to collaborate amongst all agencies, or not agencies, but all jurisdictions in the county to get that done. I think we'll have to collaborate with the different cities to try and develop an edible food recovery program. The first phase of that edible food recovery program is in 2022, January 1st, and that phase will focus on grocery stores and markets and things like that. The second phase, which happens 2 years later, will focus on restaurants and other entities like that. There's an outreach, a public education piece. There's a procurement piece. So the state of California decided when they put in 1383 is to require jurisdictions to buy back organic products. It's not a big piece. It's actually pretty small, and it's actually not going to be that big a deal for us, I believe. Probably what we're required to do as a county is to purchase, quote unquote, purchase material like compost material, and then either give it away to our residents or maybe use it at our parks or something else like that. I don't think that's something we should get really too worried about as far as what that impacts me financially. The last thing is capacity planning. So before 2022, January 1st, we have to identify how much capacity we have to handle the organic material we're going to collect out of that brown, black, and gray can, and where do we have capacity to put it. And that's why we started looking at, we had back in 2018 identified that we were short of capacity. So that's why we started saying, well, let's permit our own and maybe offset what our needs are. Matters of interest. So these are questions that I think came up at different times throughout the last year or so that have come before you. Increased service at transfer stations. I already covered that a little bit already, that we're running behind on cost recovery if gate fees were to keep up with actual service. Should we reopen Early Mart? I think that we did talk to a private hauler about that, but he seems to, during the COVID, sort of disappeared on us a little bit, probably hunkering down, just trying to make sure his business survives, be my guess. But I think it is something that is going to be interesting to really take a hard look at as we deal with Teapot, because that southern half of the county won't have service either by Teapot or by Early Mart. Now we're looking at Mid-County and North County. So it's an interesting sort of, I think, synergy that might come out of that. Increased community cleanup events. That was something that was brought up by this board. We are going to be coming before you with probably a rate increase, our annualized rate increase for the haulers in September. And part of that, we will enter into negotiations with them to look at a variety of different changes in our current franchise agreement. One will be to add community cleanups, but we have to add some organics pieces to comply with 1383. We're also going to take a look at some other sort of cleanups inside those agreements to make them more efficient and a little better for us. The last one was privatization. So we went out and got HF&H, our consultant who helped us put together the franchise agreements, to take a look at what would it mean to privatize or our landfill system. And what they did is they went out and took a look at a cost proposal to see where that would end up. So that's one of the other things we can talk about. I can go into depth now, or I can wait till your questions come at another time. But what they found was that they looked at operational costs, compared ours to others. And on some, we were competitive, and on some, they were lower. The challenge with that, which they point out in their document, is that it's hard to compare apples to apples based on what is factored into that operational cost. So I think I guess you could go either way. You could look at it and say we're competitive with other landfills in our area, and you could also say there are ones that are cheaper than us, and take a hard look at why that's different. I think what's interesting to me about that report is if you go to the very last page of that report, and you go to the very last table of that report, it tells you what the tip rates are at all these landfills that they looked at this operating costs. Well, we're still cheaper. So what's interesting to me about the report, you might say, is that there are entities out there that have lower operating costs than us, but not lower tip fees than us. So there's a disconnect there somewhere. And I think that would be a disconnect that if you wanted to explore this more, I would take a look at. Like, why is that disconnect there? Because I think the goal would be, in my mind, would be to get, a cheaper rate or better service or more service for the customer. So I think if we were going to go to a privatization, the idea would be to get one of those threes done. Lower rates, more service, or a different type of service. Goals of our department. So going forward, our primary goal at the moment is getting this phase 4 expansion done, which is underway, and make sure we don't have any significant cost overruns. We're on track right now. We've had a couple of change orders, but nothing very material. Getting Woodville landfill reopened is an absolute priority for us, so we don't have any glitches or hangups. Getting a new compost permit so we can make sure we're in compliance with 1383, capacity planning, and then looking at some alternative energy generation. So we look at our growth opportunities as rethinking our landfill model to become more than just landfilling, but become a full service sort of composting opportunity as well. I already spoke about the material management, 3 carts where materials moving from the black and gray and brown cart over to the green. Explore some new revenue streams, that's the composting side of it. We see professional development because we're going to probably need to add at least 1 more staff person, potentially 2 to deal with 1383, even though I think the majority of the actual work will be done by our franchise haulers, which will require us to probably raise rates for them to do that work. But we're going to have to manage that work. There's a lot of reporting on our side that we have to do. So we look at another staff person probably within the next 6 months to bring that on board so that we can be ready for that startup on January 1st, 2022. And right now we have great long-term viability, as you can see from that original chart I showed you where our cash is still running really nicely. That's it for my presentation. We do have a small video we can play now, I guess. Oh, there it goes. So this is a shot with one of our newest assets we purchased. We purchased a small drone that we're going to use for doing some of this type of work, but primarily it's going to be doing for volume calculations to manage. So as you can see there, that's the new cell that's being built. And that's in the middle of it being constructed. As you look off to the far right, there's a little patch of Gray, that's where the composting facility would be off to that far right over there in that area. That cell hopefully will last 5 or 6 years.
Was this a lower cost drone that didn't have
Yes.
background music?
Very lower cost drone.
Okay.
This is one of our employees piloting the drone.
It was
Who's
Luke.
going to be the drone pilot? You can see that's our active areas off there in the distance. You can sort of see where the trash is. As you look around over to the right a little bit, that's where our green waste piles are that we've been processing and grinding up. We use that for ADC, or alternative daily cover. And one of the nice things about this, you can see that we don't have any houses around us, which is sort of nice.
Yeah.
We have some, farmland and some cows next to us, but no residents around us. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for a very entertaining video to conclude your presentation. We'll have to add that into our department requests as they come and give us an update. Supervisor Crocker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Several things. When you were talking about the composting, is that going to include animal carcasses? Because I know that's been something, or that's a separate process as far as when we recently did the emergency declaration for dairy cows because Baker Commodities shut down.
Thank you for bringing that up. I should have included that as one of our issues. You're absolutely right. So that has been brought up by a variety of people. In fact, the Ag Commissioner reached out to me recently to talk about that. So what we're doing about that in the short term, the composting is long term. So yes, we could take organic material in there. We could take carcasses into that. No, that to answer your question. Short term, more immediate, we're looking at how we can change our permits to take that material in. So you as a board can make that decision whenever you want to. So we're going through that process to amend our permits.
Very good. You also mentioned the bottle program. That's currently failing at the state level, correct? And as far as the whole recycling of cans and bottles, as far as the fund and businesses not willing to take it, is that your understanding?
Correct. The redemption program is very tough as a business model. So to try and be in business doing redemption only is very difficult right now. Commodity prices move around. It's hard to, it's a difficult, and you're right, a lot of those redemption centers are closing down. We do not operate one.
So if organics is going to be based off of that, then we have a lot to look forward to. So on the organics piece, you also mentioned possibly having inspectors, or maybe you didn't use that terminology, but having staff check on residential carts. Is that kind of what's envisioned on organics to have that? And what does that look like? 'Cause that's
right. What does that look like? Exactly. So the regulation basically says that to be in compliance with 1383, you have to offer an organics recycling program to your residents and commercial entities. Typically, that means your 3-cart system, and you have to offer that. But then you have to make sure there's compliance with that. And generally what that means is you need to go out and look. You need to measure. And so that's what's envisioned. I would say what's going to take place is that our haulers already sort of inspect those loads to make sure they don't have the wrong types of material in them. They already do that already. This will just be another level where they have to do that, but then they have to report back to us what they find. And then there's another element to that, which where then us as an entity are required to do something to correct that. Generally, that means a fine. Right now, the haulers have a system where if you don't do that correctly, they don't have a mechanism to find anybody. We're just going to assume that's trash now. But we have to come up with an ordinance that actually has a fine involved. And the inspection could be by us as the jurisdiction, or we can delegate that to a designee.
That's good to know, because because I can easily see how that would require a large staffing up to be able to do that. And I know that haulers are already doing that, so what it's sounding like is that they just be another burden on them to try and inspect, or if we get a third party.
Oh, no, just in terms of identifying where that fine is placed on. So is it the customer or the hauler for that potential fine? It's the customer?
It would be, yeah, on the
Generator.
individual customer that would, if they're not placing in the right bin.
Correct, the generator is held accountable.
And I guess just on the, I appreciate the community cleanup and seeing that there's going to be something moving forward with that. I think there's been a few of us that have mentioned that in the past, and so I'm pleased to hear that that's moving forward. As far as the outsourcing, and I would be curious to see whether or not we're including other costs as far as what are the costs of operation, like pension, retirement costs, healthcare costs, training. You mentioned, I know in the past we've talked about individuals that have long-term employees that are retiring, and so bringing people up to speed as far as where those individuals were, equipment costs, are those a part of it? And if not, if you include that, does that bring it up into, a more level field, or possibly it's already there and we're just, still doing very well?
Okay.
And then my last point I just state is that, you mentioned a lot of moving parts and things that may be coming up in the next several months and years, and that as we're reaching milestones or getting close to have those regular updates for the board, as well as, prior to beginning new projects, just keeping us abreast as far as what's going on with Teapot Dome, Woodville, Visalia, et cetera, so that we're a part of those conversations. Thank you.
All right, Supervisor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Bryce, for the presentation. Appreciate all the information. Couple of things you had mentioned about when we're talking about the green waste and after 2022. So the current plan is all of it will need to go to Visalia?
So currently, we take green waste in that self-haul brings us. Most of our commercial franchise haulers, they take it somewhere else besides us. They take it either to the two private entities that are in the county or to a location outside of the county.
And if just a private individual took a trailer full of...
Right, that's typically what we see is the landscapers and private individuals.
And it would need to go to Visalia after 2022. That will be our only possibility currently in our current plan?
So after 2022, we will not be allowed to use that material, which we currently use it for, which is cover material.
Right.
We'll have to use it for something else. We probably have a year or so where we can use it for erosion control and other things like that on our facility, but we're going to need to find another outlet for it.
And you were mentioning composting at Visalia?
Yeah, that's one of our projects we're taking a look at is getting a composting permit at Visalia. Those can take years to get. So I think we have a very good team here inside RMA that's very good at doing this stuff. We're excited about working with them, and we're hoping to get this done within the next year.
Oh, great. That's really good. And then switching over to Teapot, you had mentioned there is some energy generation at Visalia right now.
Correct.
Is that biogas or methane?
It's methane that comes off the landfill, and it's burned into a big internal combustion engine, which turns a generator, which powers electricity.
Okay. So there, yeah, I was wondering if we might explore, Teapot Dome for that.
Okay.
As well as biogasification and for electrical as well. There might be a possibility there.
Okay.
And then I just wanted to say I appreciated the consideration to extend it as long as possible, because I think there's a real need in the southeast county, so I've been concerned about that for a while once we get to the point where we have to shut that one down. And I know the transfer stations don't pay for themselves, but I know I've suggested that before, that once we do shut it down, just a place to drop it would be, and again, that's just a transfer station, so
Sure.
Maybe we could have to come up with some creative ways, but I just really would like to see something stay southeastern Tulare County, because if not, that's just quite a ways for people to be hauling, so.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Supervisor Valero.
All right. Well, first, I just want to say thank you to Bryce and your team for the goals and improvements and the SWOC that we heard this afternoon, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and concerns moving forward. So I do appreciate you bringing us up to speed on what that looks like moving forward. One of the things that I just wanted to point out was with regards to education and professional development. My hope is that the county also bears some of that responsibility and that we don't necessarily leave it to the haulers to be the ones to implement that, but that we are working in tandem with our haulers on education and improving that for our community.
All right, and I just want to finish up by saying thank you to Bryce as well. It's great to have you back in front of us in much better terms than what it has been in several years past, but I appreciate you highlighting the fact that we started at a place where our fund was pretty much dilapidated and down to nothing for a sustainable future, and through the work that you've undertaken and the collaboration with our haulers, we've been able to get that fund to a very healthy level for the long-term success of the solid waste department and that service being provided here in Tulare County. I think that the transfer station issue creates a real opportunity for Tulare County, whether it's when Teapot Dome closes and looking at something in the southeast county, or looking at former transfer stations like Early Mart, where there is a franchised hauler who could see it as a business opportunity for them to, say, lease it from the county and operate it. Not only is it a resource for members of the community or people close to it to be able to utilize that, it could also be some sort of a business benefit for haulers. I think that that's a very valuable idea to explore. And I also think the investment or focus on community cleanups is going to pay off in the long run as well. Should help us deal with some of the other issues we might have to face in code enforcement or compliance when we don't have those community cleanup days or resources available to members of the community. So great work. Appreciate the update. And your environment, your department is very heavily regulated, and seeing the long-term trajectory being relatively positive is a real kudos to the work that you and your department have undertaken over these last few years to help put us here. So thank you very much, Bryce. Much appreciated. Supervisor Crocker?
Yeah, thank you. I forgot to mention, I know you had it on one of the slides, enforced mandatory collection. That's, I think, still an issue, considering that we still have quite a bit of trash that's, larger than or smaller than your large pieces of, outside of tires and appliances, those type of things. Is there any way, what can we do to help out and make sure that people are utilizing a service that they're supposed to be anyway?
So, there is mandatory collection in certain areas, and
the valley floor where there's mandatory collection.
So if you're talking about the other areas, certainly 1383 is going to push us to make sure we have mandatory, we have to have some mechanism to collect organics from people.
Well, and I guess the issue I'm seeing is that we have a mandatory collection, but it's not being enforced. So we're seeing more, or I'm seeing that there's, more trash out and about where people aren't utilizing a service that they're supposed to be utilizing.
And you believe that this is through people that aren't subscribing for service potentially?
Correct.
Okay. Well, certainly we can strengthen our ordinances around that. We can come to you with that, make sure they're strong enough to enforce those. And then we're going to have to work through a mechanism of enforcement. There's lots of different mechanisms out there. Some are not that fun. Quite frankly, they're just, it's a pain. Right. But basically what I see happening is one format would be that if somebody doesn't, because the garbage company can send them a bill and they don't pay it, right? So then what happens? So then we come before you and you stick it on a tax roll. That's basically what happens. So that's the system that is basically in place that a lot of communities use. So
we do that for water and sewer, and I still see people that are burning trash, and and we're doing that type of stuff, and so if we have some type of mechanism to discourage those type of practices, I think that
Well,
we
certainly
can
if somebody's paying for the
minimize.
service, whether they,
Correct.
then you're going to use it. At least that would be the hope.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation, and that was just a request to receive a presentation. I don't believe there's any formal action attached to that. We will move on to take up item 35. Thank you, Bryce, for the great presentation, and Luke, thank you for serving as his bodyguard. You did a great job back there protecting him. Item 35 is where board members can make a referral to staff to have a matter of business be considered for a future agenda. Are there any such requests here today? Supervisor Valero?
Thank you, Chairman. So I would like to request a brief update regarding our 2020 elections and the debacle with the United States Postal Service announcement floating around these past few weeks. So I'm hoping that we can get an update from our elections division on what our game plan will be should USPS slow our process, in addition to COVID-19 concerns and other items to consider as the elections near.
All right, thank you for that request. Anything else from board members? All right, seeing none, council, do we have need for closed session?
Yes, we do have need for closed session. Items A, B, and E are off calendar. The balance will be heard in closed session, and I do expect one announcement out.
Okay, thank you for attending today's board meeting. We will now adjourn to closed session. Stay healthy and well. Thank you.
Jennifer Flores, Chief Deputy County Counsel, reporting out for item C. The Board of Supervisors accepted a settlement offer proposed by the opposing party to avoid future litigation. The adverse party is In Time Solutions, Inc. The case involves an expiring agreement between Tulare County Sheriff's Department and In Time to create a digital time card system. The vote was made on motion of Supervisor Dennis Townsend, seconded by Supervisor Emily Shuklian, approved unanimously. A copy of the settlement agreement may be requested as a public record. That concludes reporting out for today's closed session.